各位同事啊，咁啊夠人夠鐘啊，咁啊現在會議正式開始。咁咧就今日嘅會議咧將會係
I now call to meet order meeting to order. We are going to use the electronic system for our voting procedure today. So please be seated. First item, confirmation of minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of October. The draft has been sent to members. So far, the Secretary hasn't received any proposed amendments. So, members, can I confirm the minutes now? If there's no proposed amendment, thank you. Minutes confirmed. Information papers issued since the meeting on the 18th of July 2018. There were CB1, 1315, 1718, bracket 01. For your members, is for members' information. Another CB1, 135-1819, bracket 02. For the next meeting, it will be held on the 27th of December, a Tuesday. We will start our meeting at 2:30 p.m. 5 items have been proposed by the administration. First item, the Public Works Fund. Second, strengthening the staffing of a CDD to take forward land supply and development project. 30, proposed creation of director posts in the planning department, and proposed funding scheme to optimize the use of vacant government sites, and also a footbridge at exit B of Kowloon Bay MTR station. So, members, what do you say about these 5 items? The meeting is going to be a long one, so we would end that meeting at 6:15 p.m. All right, if there's no comment, we move on to the next item. Lift Modernization Subsidy Scheme. Please refer to paper CB1 35-1819 bracket 03, and also a paper prepared by the Secretariat, the CB1 35-1819 bracket 04. Please invite the officials to join us now. Please press the button if you want to speak.
咁啊，係你好。係今日出席會議嘅政府部門代表包括咧就黃偉綸發展局局長，薛永恒先生亦都係機電工程署嘅署長，何志偉先生就係市區重建局嘅總監呂復修嘅，仲有咧就係羅鑑華先生啦，發展局嘅常務副秘書長規劃及地政嘅。周兆喜先生嘅發展局嘅副秘書長公務庫3嘅，張劍青機電工程署總機電工程師一般法例嘅。咁或者咧，我請政府。
Deputy Secretary Mrs. Francis Chow, Deputy Secretary, Works 3. I would defer to the Deputy Secretary for introduction to this program. In the CE's 2018 policy address, the government announced the launching of a $2.5 billion lift modernization subsidy scheme to promote lift modernization and safety standards. In the 6 years from 2019 to 20, we're going to provide a subsidy and also professional support to building owners in enhancing lift safety. We have 66,000 lifts in Hong Kong. If they are properly examined and maintained, they can be used safely. With rapid technological advancement in recent years, modern lifts are equipped with much more comprehensive safety devices than the old ones. In 2011, the EMSD promulgated the guideline for modernizing existing lifts and encouraging lift owners to upgrade their lifts so that they are more comfortable and reliable. But this is a voluntary scheme. At present, only 5,600 aged lifts in Hong Kong have been upgraded. This kind of progress is not significant. Therefore, we have made reference to other schemes such as the Operation Building Bright and the Fire Services Upgrade Scheme. And that's how we come up with this 2.5 billion initiative. First of all, this is people-oriented. We would provide subsidy and assistance to older lifts with a cap put on the rateable values, and the cap for the urban area, including Sha Tin, Kwai Chung, and Tsuen Wan, is 162,000 per annum. So for new territory, the cap is $124,000 per annum. We believe that 13,000 lifts will be eligible. Second, this is about safety first. For those who have received an improvement order from EMSD or lifts which are not equipped with the latest safety devices, they will be given priority. The cap of subsidy for each lift is 60% of the project cost, or up to $500,000. The money can be spent on upgrading aged lifts. Property owners who are over the age of 60 would get a full or half cost subsidy up to the $50,000. And we will have make reference to the capacity of the industry. We believe that we can upgrade 5,000 aged lifts in 6 years. And we'll work with the URA to achieve a better synergy. Will involve the URA in launching the subsidy scheme. We can accept the first batch of applications by March 2019. Some people may be concerned about bid rigging in relation to the upgrading projects. So apart from the regular measures that we would adopt to combat bid rigging, we have also taken on board certain special measures. For example, they will have to use the URA's advisory service on tendering, smart tendering, and also they can take part in the police program of safe households, so that they can make an informed choice in inviting tenders. We would like to invite views from members. And in November this year, we're going to submit an application to the Finance Committee with a view to launching the lifts in a timely manner, so that the lifts of aged lifts can be upgraded in good time. Well, this item is related to a funding proposal. So please note Rule 83A of House Rules. If you have an interest, a peculiar interest in relation to the program, please declare the nature of interest before you speak. We have a rather busy schedule today, so 3 minutes for each member. Mr. Jeremy Tam. I support this lift modernization subsidy scheme. But you draw the line by referring to a cap of rateable values. For example, for Sha Tin, Tsuen Wan, it's a 160 thousand, but 120 odd thousand for the NT. Let's say I own a flat which is worth $5 million, but my financial pressure will not vary just because I live in another district or in different districts. So please tell us why you have these two criteria. Why do we not have the same line drawn for all buildings? I'll ask the URA representative to respond. The rateable values of properties in the urban area are different from those in the NT. This subsidy scheme, aims at assisting properties with lower values. Well, it's not meaningful. In the same district, you have more expensive properties and less expensive properties. If I own a flat of worth of $5 million, whether it's Hung CHU Hoi-dick or Shui or Hong Kong Island or Aberdeen, what's the difference? We have made reference to the Operation Building Bright 2.0 and the fire safety improvement work subsidy scheme, and we want to cover a certain target group, so it's meaningful. Well, you didn't get my point. I own a property which has a certain value. The fact that this flat is in a certain district doesn't make any difference to me. I don't understand the logic. You don't have to explain to us why you have to set two criteria. Yes, you're talking about buildings over 30 years old. How do you come up with these two different criteria? Would you tell a CSSA recipient that your payment will vary depending on where you live? Well, this is not the logic. Mr. Ho was trying to say that if we do this, we can cover 80% of properties. If we adopt what Mr. Tsim would like to have, then I don't know whether you adopt one of the two cap levels, and I don't know what would happen to the coverage. Well, this subsidy scheme is a response to the community's aspiration to upgrade and modernize our lives. Every time when we have a round of Operation Building Bright scheme projects, the cost will go up. So I'm concerned about cost, and I'm also concerned about manpower. We are concerned about the manpower situation in the lift and escalator sector. The sector will be more interested in installing the new lifts. So I would like to ask what you are going to do to make sure that there is manpower. And you are talking about special cases for owners to apply for the subsidy. What would be considered as acceptable grounds for owners? Thank you for your support. Thank you for the support. We are also concerned about manpower. That's why this is a scheme that will last for 6 years, and annually we are going to upgrade 600 or up to 900 lifts. Through some vocational and on-job training programs, we have seen steady intake of new workers. Annually, trainees trained by the VTC. In the past, we only had 70. And in 2014, 2016, 2015, 16, we have been seeing intake or graduates numbered 200 to 250. So the manpower supply will be sufficient to cope with this subsidy scheme, as well as to take up the positions vacated by retirees. For the 3 new owners, when the owners want to carry out improvement works, then apart from owners, corporations, they may also set up a committee for that particular improvement project under the DMC. And we would work with NGOs in collaboration with them to help them set up a committee for the purpose of taking forward the improvement works. I would suggest that the Home Affairs Department should be involved, because they have participated in past rounds of different subsidy schemes. Mr. Lau Kok-fun, the DAB welcomes this lift modernization subsidy scheme. We propose this so that we can improve lift safety. As for the threshold, you have referred to the Operation Building Bright. But that scheme is for buildings that are over 50 years. But you know that lifts age 25 or more may have safety concerns. So there's a difference of 25 years in the age-related criterion. Would you allow the aged lifts over 25 years to participate? Of the eligible lifts numbered 13,000, you are going to cover 5,000. What about the others? Are you going to provide others assistance? In Xiangshui and Chunwan, there are 2 private estates, Mingdou and Hoi Wan. Would they be eligible?
I think you know very well our plan OBB 2.0. When we first launched the scheme, we may not have sufficient resources to cover all the buildings and lifts. Our view is like this: if this scheme goes on well, after 2 years' time, we will conduct a review. And if the government has sufficient funds, then we may consider revising the scheme so that more lifts can be covered. So you will be adding resources to it, right? Yes, you're right. But I cannot say it definitely now. So we have 6 years' time, we will be covering 5,000 lifts. And also there is the concern of manpower, because we have to do it in phases. And in the 6th year, we will be providing subsidy to 900 lifts. As for individual buildings, I will answer you later. Well, for URA, for a lot of property owners, they may not know their RV. So when application is made, the URA would have the relevant data, and the URA will tell the buildings whether they are eligible. So if this scheme is popular, then after 2 years' time, you will inject more funds into it, right? So after the implementation of the scheme, in about 2 years' time, we will review the scheme and we will look at the details, whether it runs smoothly. We will also look at our financial resources, etc. We do not rule out this possibility. Helena Wong, I have 2 questions. We're talking about $2.5 billion and about 13,000 lifts will be eligible. So for this $2.5 billion, can it take care of all the 13,000 lifts? No, you're shaking your head. And you hope that 5,000 lifts can be modernized in 6 years' time. So for this $2.5 billion, it's sufficient for 5,000 lifts. And after the money is all spent, what will happen to the remaining 8,000 lifts? So do we will have to wait for your review after 2 years, or after the 6 years, after you have modernized the several thousand lifts, and then we will wait for another funding of $2.5 billion. Well, we'll have to look at it then. If you look at OBB 2.1, when we launched it, it didn't cover all the eligible buildings. That's not possible. So this is phase 1, and it will last for 6 years. So 5,000 lifts is adequate. If individual buildings are really worried, I advise them not to wait for the subsidy. They should modernize their lifts as soon as possible. So after a certain time, we will conduct a review. There are a lot of factors to be considered. We estimate that we can cover 5,000 lifts, and we know the estimated cost for each lift approximately. So after 2 years, we will have more details, and by then we will know what to do. And after 6 years, we will decide what to do. So this is like a pilot scheme. You will try to find out whether it's feasible, and then maybe you'll add more resources. No. If this is a pilot scheme, we will not be covering as many as 5,000 lifts. For the Operation Building Bright 2.0, we are talking about private buildings. And it's about basic maintenance. But this maintenance responsibility lies with the owners. But we cannot rely on the stick. We have to give them carrots. So that's why we are providing assistance. So, but in the future, we really have to look again. Now, 13,000 lifts are waiting to be modernized, but you can only cover 5,000 lifts. So people have to compete to get your funding. If they are slow, they cannot get it. We will be vetting the applications openly, and then we will look at the risks of each lift. They will be put in order. In the past, when we didn't have this scheme, well, your time is up. Mr. Gary Fan. I also want to ask the government about manpower. Will there be enough manpower? You're talking about $2.5 billion for modernizing lifts. I think you will be receiving numerous applications. Several months ago, I've already heard about some buildings didn't intend to do it, but now they want to do it because of the subsidy. So for registered lift engineers, now we have about 300, and for the relevant workers, 5,000. The government said that in 2014, you talked to the CIC, and then there were lift maintenance courses, and now the number of students has increased to 250 a year. But this is newly trained personnel. Can they really do the job? You already allocate this amount of money, and within 6 years' time, you want to modernize all these lifts. Do you think that will be enough people to do it? And at the end of May, you told us that you will be exploring with the industry as to how to improve the working environment of the frontline workers, because there is a shortfall in manpower and the pay is not good. If they work in the construction industry, they get better pay. So how can you train more people, and how can you enhance their pay so that there will be enough manpower to work for this scheme? Secretary, thank you for your question. In the past few years, we have launched different schemes. In 1 year, we modernized over 2,000 lifts, but it's a voluntary scheme, so the number dropped to several hundred a year. So what does this tell us? The industry has the capability to modernize 2,000 lifts a year. However, the number of lifts increases every year, so this may affect the industry's capacity. So we will have to be prudent. We do not want to exert extra pressure on the industry, and that may compromise the work quality. So each year, we are targeting 600 to 900 lifts for modernization. And also we will be monitoring the industry situation. We hope that we can cope with the workload. For the mechanics and the frontline workers' pays, we are very concerned about that. In the past few years, we've been meeting with the industry regularly. We know that the pay has been increasing. We have received a motion that's moved by Lam Cheuk-ting and Hon CHU Hoi-dick. After the discussion, we will be handling this motion. Next, Mr. Wu Chi-wai. Thank you, Chairman. I also have a question about manpower. We have seen several lift accidents, and we were told that there is a serious manpower shortage in the industry. In the paper, you tell us that the industry capacity is about 1,500 lifts. Is this a residual capacity? I cannot imagine that with this scheme, the demand would go up by 40%, and you are telling me that there will be enough manpower for that increase. I think it's divorced from reality. We have seen serious lift accidents. I think there was not enough manpower to do the maintenance and monitoring work. So how do you assess the manpower situation? And secondly, the lift industry is a very special one. Well, because we mainly have 11 lift companies, and there are about 30 to 40 maintenance companies. So this is not a very big industry. The lift companies may charge for the sale of lifts at a very low cost. However, when they do the maintenance, they would jack up the price. And if you hire another company to maintain the lift, then you may not be able to buy the parts from the original lift company. Do you have ways to tackle this problem? Well, I hope that after the lifts are modernized, the property owners won't encounter this problem anymore. That is, they cannot buy parts from the original company. I would like to thank Mr. Wu. He is really concerned about the lift industry. Well, the lift industry attaches a lot of importance to maintenance. Well, we have 5,700 registered lift maintenance personnel, and the number has already increased. Well, time is up. Lam Cheuk-ting. Well, in Shanghai, there was a tragic lift accident. I am pleased to see that now the government has come up with this scheme to help buildings. But now you are using Operation Building Bright 2.0 scheme as a model. However, OBB 2.0 target buildings that are over 50 years old. And in many of these buildings, there is no lift. The RV is generally lower than other buildings that have lifts. So for the new territories, the RV is set at 124,000, and for the urban areas, you set it at $162,000. So the rent is about $30,000 in the urban areas and $10,000 in NT. So for that Hung Shui building, for a 400 square feet unit, the rent is about $13,000 to $15,000. The property owner might have bought the unit several decades ago. Yes, the property price has increased. However, their financial situation is not that good. Well, you're telling me that this scheme has covered most of the buildings in Hong Kong. I don't know how you're looking at property prices in the urban areas. Can you use $13,000 to rent a reasonable unit? In the NT, if the rent is $10,000, it's very difficult to find a proper unit. So can you further relax the application standard? Otherwise, you are not helping. Thank you for your question. I think Mr. Lam supports our direction. You just queried the threshold. We think the threshold we set now is appropriate. Some other members have mentioned it. For the eligible lifts, the number is about 13,000. We are now providing $2.5 billion, and we will be covering 5,000 lifts. So if the threshold is lowered, there will be more eligible lifts. Well, let me talk to you about one figure. For OBB 2.0, you have a lot of surplus. You always overestimate the demand. Actually, in the past few years, many buildings have already maintenance their lifts, so you don't have to be so tight-fisted. Well, for the Hung Shui building that had the tragic accident, it doesn't even get $1 of subsidy. I think you will know what my answer is. In the future, we will be looking at the actual operation and whether there will be problems, as you highlight. Now, for that $2.5 billion, it doesn't cover only 5,000 lifts. I think it can cover more. But this is quite urgent, and that Hung Shui building has to upgrade its lifts because people are dead. Mr. Ho Kai-ming? Well, manpower is indeed a problem. We have about 6,000 people who are in this industry, and they do all the maintenance in Hong Kong. I think more training must be provided, but how can you do it in a short time? I hope the government will think about this. Well, maybe you should have a registered workman who will take an apprentice when he works, so that they can work together and the safety can be enhanced, and the enough time would be given to this pair of workmen so that they can do the maintenance properly. By doing so, we can ensure the safety of lifts. So for EMSD, can you talk to the industry about this? Can they improve the manpower situation in this manner? And also, property owners are very concerned about bidding. For smart tender, it's mainly for large-scale estates and buildings. So can smart tender protect all the property owners? We think that CMSD has a responsibility. You should ensure that property owners understand the conditions of their lifts and how much improvement should be made to the lifts. You should make sure that the contractors explain clearly to the property owners so that property owners can make informed choices. Thank you for your question. In terms of manpower, in the past few years, it's been increasing in a stable manner. Let me tell you some figures. In the past few years, well, in 2012, we have 4,060 people, and then there was a 15% increase to 5,200. As for the number of lifts, was also an increase, but the number of registered mechanics increased more than the number of lifts. So we have to work hard. In the past few years, we have seen something good. We had mechanics joining our industry. In 2012, there was about 6,000, and then in 2017, we have 1,800, and this was a significant growth. So for this general mechanics, they learn how to maintain lifts from professionals, and now they are joining the lift maintenance industry. Mr. Hon CHU, I welcome the lift modernization subsidy scheme because it would help make our lifts safer. But I want to ask about some details. For this scheme, according to the paper, you will only be subsidizing 60% of the construction cost, or is capped at $500,000 per lift. The money will the money be dispersed to owners' corporations or owners' committees, or to elderly owners themselves? So for OCs and owners' committees, do they really know whether the lifts should be maintained, and may be sometimes they cannot form consensus and there will be disputes? So can the government explain to us, now you're providing this subsidy, you want the lifts to be modernized, but what incentive can be provided, or in what way can you make sure that the OCs will follow your instructions? Some OCs may not follow all the requirements. Well, of course, we want to promote changes. This is the first question I want to ask. And for the second question, is about manpower. In the paper, you've talked about the industry's capability. According to your paper, you say that each year you can modernize 1,500 lifts. And if this number is increased, the cost will be higher. Can you explain to me more about the manpower planning? And we are talking about 5,000 lifts. So when it comes to manpower arrangements, how can you make sure that the industry has enough capacity?
So in terms of addressing the issue, well, we have the subsidy scheme, and as Director just said, in terms of manpower, we will provide more training. Hopefully, in the market, there will be enough qualified staff. And if that's the case, then the cost will become more reasonable, and that's a positive approach. And people have also asked about legislating to make the safety aspect mandatory. We would not rule that out, but right now we don't have such concrete plan yet, because to many owners, particularly those in aged buildings, it could have a huge impact on them. In some mandatory building inspection schemes, we've learned some lessons, so we need to be careful. Chen Chong-tai next. Firstly, I agree about the issue of thresholds. I agree with the views expressed, and I also like to know about whether you are being optimistic, overly optimistic, as mentioned by some members. There's manpower shortage in the industry. And also, given the current circumstance, would it be possible that, because you try to achieve your goal, and then you oversimplify enhancement schemes like this? As mentioned in the paper in Annex 2, there are 7 enhancement options. And indeed, recently, looking at the serious tragedies or incidents lately, they are actually in relation to device 2 and 3. For example, it's about whether there is overspeeding of a standard car, and also movement protection devices. And the paper shows that 80% of the buildings have not installed such devices. So if you set such a high indicator, then in the end, would it be like installation of CCTV and primarily? I hope that we'll need to be pragmatic. Let's be pragmatic and do actually take actions at a smaller number of buildings first. Looking at the percentage, 70 to 80% of the buildings are not installed with important security devices. The installation of CCTV or automatic rescue device, that also falls under 80%. So you may say that I'm putting forward a conspiracy theory, but based on the figures and comparing that, with your target, I'm worried that you may just try to reach the target of 5,000 by just providing enhancement measures that cannot ensure lift safety. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, as we said earlier. Firstly, the industry did manage to have 2,500 lifts enhancements, but in the days ahead, we need to step up or beef up our manpower supply. And we've seen new bloods entering the industry. So the staff have risen from 600 to 1,800. And we need to ensure that the resources are spent on the 4 important devices, modernization items for lifts. So the subsidy scheme must ensure that the 4 items are provided. Eddie Chu. Thank you, Chairman. Short questions. The first one is for the owners, flat owners. How would they know that their buildings comply with the average rateable value? Is it that the government would take the initiative to inform the owners of the 13,000 lifts? And also, as mentioned before, there are a total of 66,000 lifts, and the government threshold makes it that there are 30,000 lifts eligible. If you just look at the condition of the lifts alone, how many of them comply with the government standard in terms of the condition of the lift? And also in paragraph 13 of the paper, it's also mentioned that elderly owners, provided that they are given extra subsidy, then the subsidy may be dispersed to owners' corporations or the elderly owner occupiers. I don't quite understand what this means. What do you mean by, as appropriate, as mentioned in the paper? What do you mean by appropriate? And you're also saying that you're not trying to force people to change lifts by giving them a penalty, but you're trying to provide an incentive. So it's like the feed-in tariff of the 2 power companies. Regardless of their wealth, as long as you're willing to install it, you'll be given the bonus. So I think the government should look at the number of lifts and disregard the building itself, nor the owners, occupiers, because whether the rateable value is very low or not, even if it's as low as 10,000 in the new territories, that doesn't mean the owners are poor. Whereas on the Hong Kong Island, in buildings with high rateable value, that doesn't mean the owners are rich. They may not have much assets. So if you use the current threshold, that would be simply maybe for the sake of convenience on your part, because you don't look at the individual situation of the owners. Or you can set thresholds, different thresholds for Hong Kong, Kowloon, new territories, like 1,000 lifts for Hong Kong, 2,000 lifts targeted for new territories, and so forth. Okay, Secretary, Mr. Chu, yes, first question, yes. The Urban Renewal Authority will take the initiative to let the buildings know whether they are eligible, and it's up to them to decide whether to apply. And also, we need to draw a line for your other question. Personal financial situation, I'm not going to comment on that, but for middle class or people living in rich or luxuries buildings, I don't think that they should join the scheme. We're trying to simplify the process. If the rateable value is below the threshold, then we will not have individual means test. And thirdly, how are we going to disperse the individual subsidy? I'll hand it over to my colleague. Well, we'll make the arrangement whether it's the OB 2.0 or other schemes. If the person is deemed eligible, then the subsidy will be dispersed, and we'll announce the details in due course. Ma'am Kuhn next. Yeah, the setting up, proposing of a committee involving EMSD and also the Urban Renewal Authority to judge on the priority. Well, but whoever who are applying would think that the lifts need to be changed immediately. So what sorts of objective criteria would you use? And if the applicants think that there's an urgency for them to change lifts, would you provide any procedures for them, say, for them to appeal and to convince them of our decision? And also there's the mention of manpower issue. I think the Development Bureau needs to, for the long term, provide professional training for the staff in the sector. And on this particular scheme, our worry is that once there's huge pressure on the staff, some lift companies, well, it's already happened. That is, there should be 2 people maintaining and repairing a lift, and yet they send only 1 staff to do the work. And accidents happen because of that. So the Urban Renewal Authority, if you were to offering tenders, please note on the tenders that the whoever wins the bid must provide a sufficient manpower supply, and also to ensure industrial safety. That is, there should be mechanism to ensure industrial safety. We need to lay down some requirements, and can they be put down on the tender documents? Secretary. Yes, for staff training, yes, I agree with your observation, and we do attach importance to it. But if we create too many technicians, then it may not be practical because you don't want to pull down the wages. For technician, they may get about $20,000 a month, or up to maximum of $28,000, $29,000 a month. So we need to strike a balance. Be careful with not providing an oversupply of staff. As for tender documents, Mr. Ng, please. Yes, Mr. Sid. Yes, we do care about safety of workers, and therefore we would provide tender documents for the contractors and owners to look at for reference. So in the tender documents, as Ms. Mack, what she proposed, requirements to ensure worker safety and project safety, and also to ensure there is some kind of penalty mechanism, we will consider that. How about the committee? What criteria would you give to the committee to set the priorities? Because our intention is to enhance safety, so we will adopt a risk-based approach. For details, we would further discuss with the sector. But one possibility is for the 4 most important safety devices, if all 4 devices are absent, then the safety index is low, then we need to enhance lifts without such devices to increase the chances of being subsidized. Hon CHU Hoi-dick, Andrew Wan next. 3 minutes, Chairman? Yes. I'll be quick. Just then some members made several points that I agree with. The Secretary said that he felt that it's owner's responsibility to do the maintenance work, and the government is giving them a hand. Yes, but the point is the government is not providing enough help. So $2.4 billion obviously is not enough. So the government should try to increase the amount. Otherwise, with 13,000 lifts, it's meaningless because what will benefit is only about 5,000 lifts. And about the age of buildings, I found it strange, as what I just heard, because you make reference to the maintenance scheme for buildings over the age of 50. And some buildings may not have lifts, some of those buildings. But I find it strange that, you insist on following the relevant measure, but for elderly occupiers, you're not following the existing scheme as in the building restoration scheme. Because under the building maintenance scheme, elderly people are more easily eligible for subsidy. But in this case, even if the elderly occupier owners, even if they meet the means test requirement, they may not be eligible for the subsidy. Can you align your measures? Yeah, I think Mr. Wen, I think the fact may not be as what you said. I can ask my colleague to clarify for you. They do have to join the scheme, because if you don't join the scheme, then you cannot give or be entitled to the protection. But let us explain further later on. As for rateable value, if it's too low, the idea behind it is that we want that the scheme maybe was not precise enough. For buildings above the age of 30, subsidy is about 80%. Or the limit is 80%. So even like for people who are not very well off, we don't want the scheme to be causing too much trouble to owners. Therefore, we're not going to carry out means and income test. And why is it $2.5 billion? Well, indeed, when we conceived the plan, in our contact with various political parties, and we were told that the amount could be above $2 billion. So $2.5 billion seems reasonable to us. Just then, Lam Chatting raised an example. The Hon CHU Hoi Town Centre is not eligible. Even in Yunnan, Tin Shui Wai, Gawu Santong in Yunnan, some flats are not eligible for the scheme. So who can benefit? Can the general public benefit? Well, I don't want to name particular buildings, but in the case of Hon CHU Hoi Town Centre, it would be eligible. It would be eligible. Next one is Chang Han Pan. The subsidy scheme has been long overdue, and now in the policy address is finally proposed. We welcome the idea. But as for the rateable value, it's on the low side. I hope that if we have spare resources, I think that you should relax the criterion a bit so that more can benefit. I'm now concerned about the period when people aren't eligible for the subsidy. Sometimes people wanted to change the lift, but the building owners could not reach an agreement in the absence of subsidy, and people have been waiting. Now that the scheme has been announced, that is, people can apply in 2019. So from now on till then, should the buildings invite tenders now at this stage? I'm worried that we want to have the scheme to speed up the process of lift maintenance. But in the end, we may cause people to wait till the scheme takes effect. So that's not ideal. I hope that the administration can include a retrospective period, say up till middle of this year. So whoever wants to invite tender or begin construction and eligible buildings should be covered by the scheme. So people would have their worries eased, and they can now begin the construction work now, even now, immediately. And as for manpower, I found that the URA has taken up a lot of government works, like having fire services subsidy and also lift subsidy. All these works are actually come under the URA. But I found that URA hasn't really increased its manpower. I hope they can increase their manpower supply so that, with all these subsidy schemes to benefit homeowners, there would not be bid rigging. Thank you, Secretary. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chen, for your views. We do have arrangement for a retrospective period because the scheme was announced by the chief executive on October 10th this year, and when the announcement was made, when there were building maintenance works underway, and those projects that have already begun by then are still eligible. So the scenario you just mentioned, that should actually be covered by the scheme. But the retrospective period, can you extend it further? Because we know that when the lift tragedy happened this year, the government said that it would shoulder the cost for lift maintenance. So people have been awaiting some sort of help. And if you want to set the period, beginning of the period at October 10th, that's a bit late. Could you extend it further to earlier, a few months earlier? Well, For example, if they conceive the maintenance work middle of this year, I believe that by October 10, those buildings will not have got the approval from the director of EMSD. So in other words, they should still be eligible for the scheme. Next one, Priscilla Liang. Well, first of all, I support the scheme. I'd like to thank the government for providing the amount so soon. I remember when I asked the chief executive, we asked for 2 billion and now she's offering 2.5 billion. So I appreciate what's happened. But in terms of implementation, we met here several times, and the secretary personally took us on the tour with some experts. And we did mention that for the apprentices, sometimes they don't become a proper maintenance staff until 4 years later, after they began their apprenticeship. And wages are low, and so it's difficult to retain talents. And secondly, would we, with educational institutions, could we have more long-term collaborations with them to increase the supply of skilled workers? Because lifts age, and now you're resolving the problem of 5,000 lifts out of 13,000, and then other lifts will get older. So you need to resolve this manpower issue. If you want to provide local workers, skilled workers, I think that's something necessary. And also, in paragraph 19, you mentioned about the consultants' fees, saying that you would give 20,000 consultants fees to individual buildings. That's good. But I pointed out last time when we met as well, what could happen is that there could be, like in some expensive districts where some poor elderly people are living in. So out of the $2.5 billion in the first stage of 6 years, could you provide some discretion to vetting organizations? I know money should actually follow the old elderly people, but would there be buildings in which some owners can afford the price but others cannot? And if that's the case, then the lift maintenance work may not materialize. I remember that's what happened in the building where there was a tragedy. So would you have the discretion or allow for the discretion to remain for the subsidy to be offered in the end?
I'll take up the last question first. The question is about the power of the director of EMS under the law. Whether the director can do it first and then recoup the cost from the owner, I don't think he's empowered to do this. How can we increase the incentive to deal with the situation referred to by Dr. Leung for building owners which cannot carry out the works themselves? That's why we provide this subsidy scheme. We'll subsidize 60% of the costs to encourage them to do it. All right, who hasn't spoken so far? Please press the request to speak button. We don't have a second round. All right, Mr. Chen Chi-chin. Thank you, Chairman. This is the lift modernization subsidy scheme. Of course, it can be further enhanced in many ways. As some members have commented, this is limited to some buildings with certain rateable value. Is a problem. And you are not going to subsidize urgent repair. And also whether you shouldn't you be need-based in your approach. And after Typhoon Mangkhut, in some estates, the aged lifts break down even more often. And some people say that we shouldn't take the lift while there's a typhoon. Perhaps the director can clarify whether this is the case. In private housing estates or TPS estates, many of them still have one of their lifts out of service. So after a natural disaster, and there will be the need to do the repair, can you provide some subsidy to help them? I'm not saying that they should be allowed to jump the queue. It will take some time for them, for their owners' corporation, to work something out. can you provide some funds, such as low interest loans to these owners, so that they don't have to queue under this scheme? Urgent repair is another matter. When they have lift contractors providing urgent service if there's the need. But of course, if they want to replace aged lifts, it will be covered by the subsidy scheme. Well, I was talking about what happened after the typhoon. Can you provide some urgent assistance? Well, some funds are available to the people affected by typhoons or natural disaster, but I don't know whether lift will be covered. Actually, there are a number of different channels for offering assistance to people affected by typhoon. But anyway, all the buildings have engaged lift contractors, and urgent repair will be covered if need be. Well, very often the lifts are out of service after the typhoon, not because of the question of funding, but because of the lack of spare parts or the work procedures being complicated. Well, people have been asking for this for a long time, and so I have some members. So we support this new scheme. And in the past, the major problem is the lack of funds. And now with the subsidy, there are other problems. Members have commented on the threshold, eligibility criteria, etc. I will repeat this. On the question of monitoring the progress of such improvement works, the paper mentions some monitoring will be done by the government. There will be consultants overseeing the project, and then you will also inspect the quality of works after it's completed. From my experience in dealing with lifts, the major problem is that the project goes on and on. The contractor never finishes the work. And if you complain that they would do a little bit of work, and the consultant is put in an embarrassing situation, all they can do is to urge the contractor to proceed quickly. The government will argue that this is a contractual problem. If the work of the contractor is not satisfactory, they should dismiss the contractor and get another one. But you know that lifts are very important to buildings because everything comes to a halt without lifts in a building. So apart from engaging consultants and providing advice, what more can the government do to monitor the progress of lift projects so that we can avoid a situation whereby the contractor sends 1 or 2 workers to do a sloppy job very slowly, and we cannot claim that the contractor has violated the contract. Well, I've encountered a case in a building, in respect of a building in my constituency. So you are going to provide subsidy to so many lift improvement works. Do you also help them by monitoring the progress through certain means? Well, we are of course very concerned about the quality of works under the scheme. We have 2 ways. We have 2 different measures to help owners. First of all, we have the model contracts so that the owners know very clearly about the scope of work covered. And we also have consultants to provide technical support. All right, I think that's what we have time for this item. We'll receive motions proposed by 3 members. And I've just received another one, moved by Mr. Lau Kok Fan and seconded by Mr. Chen Han-ban and Mr. Jiang Kok-Wan. Mr. Lam Chuk-ting, would you like to read out your motion? Well, I want the audience to know what we are talking about. As the criteria are too stringent for the subsidy scheme, an elderly owner must fulfill the 2 conditions. That is to say, the average rateable value of the building must be within the threshold level, and the means test for the owner has to be all right. We believe that this will not help needy building owners, especially the elderly owners with financial difficulties. Therefore, this panel urges the government to relax the application threshold under the scheme, and also to for elderly owners, if they pass the means test, they should get the subsidy even though the building itself may not be eligible. Which non-panel members, please do not vote. For those in favor, please raise your hands. A division has been claimed. Please sound the bell. I just want to clarify a point. I want to set the record straight. I said I wanted them to allow they should allow the elderly building owners to apply individually, as we have done the same for the elderly owners of repair and maintenance of buildings. I want to clarify this. Are there two criteria? Are there individual means tests for the owners? I don't know whether this is really the case. Well, elderly owners can apply under another scheme, such as Hong Kong Housing Society. They would provide a subsidy to owners, elderly owners, although the building itself is not eligible for the subsidy provided by the government. Is my understanding correct?
冇澄清，局長。
事實嘅。
Secretary? Yes, I want to clarify the facts. I think Mrs. Eugenia Yip is correct. As long as the building is satisfied the rateable value criterion, then there's no need for individual owners to apply. The schemes referred to by Mr. Lam Chuk-ting is about making improvements to individual housing units, individual flats. But we are talking about lifts. The lifts are for the entire building. So therefore, we cannot allow the individual owners to apply while the building itself does not participate in the subsidy scheme. Well, the elderly owners can get a subsidy even for the repair and maintenance projects involving common areas. Well, Mr. Lam Chuk-ting, please amend your motion. I just want to clarify this for the benefit of Mrs. Regina Yip. The schemes run by the Housing Society are different from this scheme. So for this lift modernization subsidy scheme, there's no question of individual owners to apply while the building is not eligible. I just want to cover the needed elderly owners when they incur certain expenditure. We want to relax the scheme. Otherwise, I wouldn't have moved this motion. In other words, the safeguards will not be valid, such as the safeguards for the tendering process. Well, I think it's a question of what members would like to have. Please proceed to vote. Please press the button to indicate your presence, and then you press the button of your choice in respect of the motion. All right, anyone who hasn't voted yet? Now voting is closed and the result displayed. 23 present, 21 for, 1 against, no abstention. So the motion is carried. Second motion is moved by Mr. Lau Kwok Fan, seconded by Mr. Chen Hangban and Mr. Jiang Kwok Kwan. Mr. Tommy Zhou, you want to claim a division? No? Okay, please read out your motion. For the subsidy threshold of the lift modernization subsidy scheme is based on the Operation Building by 2.0, and the line is drawn at the same rateable value, but OBB2 covers a building of 50 years or more, but there's a big difference in the age of target buildings between the two schemes. As a result, the threshold is too high and many building owners will not be benefited. Therefore, we request that there should be a retrospective effect under the lift modernization subsidy scheme, so that those who have completed those owners who have completed lift upgrading this year would be able to be eligible. Second, to raise the rateable value of targeted buildings so that more would be benefited. Thirdly, to allow the elderly owners to individually apply for the subsidy. And fourthly, to look into ways to attract new entrants into the lift and escalator industry by discussing the matter with the trade, so as to provide sufficient manpower to support the LMSS. All right, those in favor, please raise your hands. You may put down your hands. Those against? Abstentions? Please raise your hands. No? So the motion is carried unanimously. Thank you. We are now on item 5. Briefing by the Secretary for Development on the Chief Executive's 2018 Policy Address. Please refer to paper number CB-115/1819-01. And related papers include the Chief Executive's 2018 Policy Address and the 2018 Policy Agenda Booklet.
咁咧就請政府部門嘅代表入嚟。
Please invite the officials to join us now.
局長會介紹咗先。
我介紹咗先，局長介紹咗先至開始撳好嘛？咁咧就
Secretary is joined by some of his colleagues. I won't introduce the officials one by one. The list is has been provided to members. We have Ms. Benedict Lin, Mr. Lam Sai-hong, 2 permanent secretaries, and other officials. Please refer to the list for details. Mr. Wong, over to you. We have a very short PowerPoint presentation. I'll defer to Ms. Benedict Lin. Thank you. Chairman, I want to talk about, first of all, the housing and land supply related matters under the Development Bureau. Actually, this chart has previously been submitted to the public. Our measures will enable us to provide 610 housing units in the short, medium, and long term through the rezoning, and some known projects such as the former quarry sites, and some are related to railway projects. There are a number of new development areas: Kutong North, Fanning North, Hon CHU, Yunnan South, Tung Chung, the New Town, etc. The provision of 610,000 housing units will be the target, but it doesn't mean that we don't have to work harder on land supply. As the Task Force on Land Supply indicated in the public engagement exercise, we are suffering from a shortage of land, not just for housing but for other purposes, at least to the tune of 1,200 hectares, and we are not even taking into account upgrading of facilities. So we should make all the preparation to seek land supply.
In the policy address, several directions have been pointed out. That includes Land Town Tomorrow vision, and also the development of brownfield sites, as well as the use of private lands. Later on, we will be briefing on members one by one. Now, I'll ask Mr. Lam to take members through Land Town Tomorrow vision. The CE suggests a 20 to 30-year plan. In central waters, we will be forming artificial islands. In early next year, we will be making funding application to LAGCO. We will conduct a study on Hon CHU reclamation. It will cover about 1,000 hectares. And then we will also look at Hon CHU reclamation data. And the south of Changchao, we will also be collecting data from that area. As for the Hon CHU artificial islands development, we will also be building a new transport corridor which covers railways and roads. These corridors will be connecting Hong Kong Island North, coastal areas of Tsim, etc. And Long Wing Road will be upgraded, and another highway will be built which is parallel to North Land Town Highway. A small area of reclamation will also be included at Siu Ho Wan. So we will be developing all these transport infrastructure, and traffic jams will be alleviated, and better connections will also be made. And also for Long Kutan reclamation, we will start this relevant study as soon as possible. It may become a logistics center. And also With this new transport capacity, we will look again at the development potential of Tuen Mun East and West. And we have just invited the airport authority to look at the possible options for the topside development of CHU Hoi depot site, and also we hope that the area surrounding the airport will be developed. We aim at developing an aerotropolis. Reclamation at Sunny Bay will also be looked at. As for Lantau Tomorrow Vision, we will adhere to the planning principle of development in the north, conservation for the south, and the policy of conservation to precede development. Conservation measures will be implemented to enhance the environment's capacity. A $1 billion Lantau Conservation Fund will be set up to carry out natural and cultural conservations. And also, we will map out more effective means to control landfilling and dumping of waste and associated development activities causing environmental damage. I'll now hand over the floor to Ms. Lin. Other than forming lands for the development of brownfield sites in the new territories, this is also an ongoing measure of ours, and we will be enhancing our efforts. Earlier on, we have talked about this. That is for our different new development areas. We are dealing with about 340 hectares of brownfield sites. We understand that there is a lot of support in the community for us to develop such sites. So for the remaining brownfield sites, we will start a study next year. They are distributed in NT North. There are about 200 hectares there, and there are 760 hectares of brownfield sites scattered at different areas. For the 200 hectares in NT North, most of it is in Santin and Lok Ma Chau. The transport potential there is better because it will be close to the northern lobe in the future. So we hope that we will first study that area. And earlier on, we said that now we are doing 2 brownfield site studies, and they will be completed by the end of this year. First one is that we are looking at the more than 1,000 hectares of brownfield sites in Hong Kong and what activities are being carried out there. And for this brownfield site operations, if they are to be housed in a multi-story industrial building, technically and financially, would it be feasible? So within this year, we hope that these studies can be completed. And lately, we've been talking to the relevant industry members about these. Other than brownfield sites development, the CE has taken reference from the Task Force on Land Supplies comments. In the short and medium term, we really need, well, our land shortage problem is very serious. The community has given us their views. We always hear people, well, we always hear the government mentioning private and public partnership. So several directions have been set out. The Development Bureau is instructed to carry out studies. But of course, we are waiting for the Task Force on Land Supplies final reports. The final report will be available by the end of this year, and then we will map out the relevant details. Now, one of the major directions is like this. We want to explain this to members. Now, when we explore PPP or what we call now as land sharing, well, we would not give up using the land resumption ordinance. Now, if the government plans to do some development for public interest in a certain area, for example, building roads or building public housing estates, the government cannot shirk its responsibility. The government will continue to invoke the land resumption ordinance to resume private lands. However, the government cannot plan everything across the territory at the same time. So for particular land parcels, if it's not covered in the government's planned development, and if the owner put forward certain proposals, maybe land sharing options can be considered. There are several principles put forward in the policy address. First, sharing. We hope that when the owner take part in the scheme, 60 to 70% would have to be of the land would have to be used for public housing development. Now, some people may say that, well, the owners can go to the town planning board to apply to build a certain number of housing units. So why does it have to share its land? Yes, we understand that. But for these owners, if they do not have the support of the government, for example, if they do not have a site that has infrastructure, then it cannot develop high density properties there. And if the government, if is willing to allow the government to build infrastructure there, then the density of housing can be increased. But then the government can ask the owner to provide public housing there then. So for infrastructure, we hope that we can make use of the private sector's flexibility. The private sector will be responsible for building the infrastructure, but because of public interest, the government can deduct a certain degree of amount from the land premium. And for the landowner, when it develops its private housing, it has to pay a land premium at full market value. And all the statutory procedures have to be followed, including submitting application to the town planning board. So when we launch this land sharing pilot scheme, it will be an open one. All the standards and rules will be made known to the public. And for the eligible landowners, they can make application accordingly. Government departments will look at these applications, and the applications will be put before the Land and Development Advisory Committee, which comprises mostly non-official members for advice, and eventually submitted to the CE in Council for approval. Well, other than rezoning lands, we have two other measures involving optimizing the use of existing developed land. Well, we have been talking about this for many years at the LegCo. There are some civil servants, cooperative building, society scheme buildings. They tend to be low and aged. And now in those areas, higher density development is allowed. However, they could not start redevelopments due to different reasons. So in the policy address, it is stated that we will invite the URA to make use of its usual practices, and then it would identify 1 to 2 clusters of CBS lots suitable for high-density developments as pilot sites. We have already talked to the URA. Now they have to identify lots which are suitable for high-density development. For example, in the urban areas, there are some sites like this which only have a plot ratio of 3 to 4. So they should identify sites which can allow the plot ratio to go up to 7 or even higher. And also, they would use their usual practice. That is, they will offer cash compensation, which is based on the value of a notional 7-year-old replacement flat. But as you know, that the owners were civil servants. When they sell their properties, they still have to settle the outstanding land premium because they were given a premium incentive when they first built the buildings. So Now they have to repay after getting the compensation, which is equivalent to a 7-year-old replacement flat price. And after repaying the outstanding premium, they may not be able to afford another property in the same area. The policy address puts forward another option, and this is not included in this slide. You may remember that a few months ago when we came here, we mentioned that in the NT, if we develop certain shared areas, we hope that we can provide dedicated rehousing estates to them. So for this quarter areas, residents will be providing them with dedicated rehousing estates. So the same will apply to the CBS owners. We hope that sites can be identified so that dedicated rehousing estates can be provided. In the future, when URA redevelop CBS lots, this is the practice they will adopt. That is, they may be rehoused in dedicated rehousing estates. They are given the opportunity to purchase a subsidized sale flat unit in dedicated rehousing estates. Now we are giving time to the URA to work. In early next year, the URA will be submitting proposals to the government, and by the end of next year, announcement will be made concerning the final arrangement. And now I would like to talk about revitalizing industrial buildings. We will have a meeting on this, so today I'll just be talking about the salient points. And we have 6 major measures under this. For the first 3, they involve redevelopment of the whole building or wholesale conversion of industrial buildings. And for exempting the waiver fees, we already talked about it last time. But you may have noted that this time around we have added another condition. That is 10% of the floor area will be used for specific uses prescribed by the government. Now, because there may be arts and cultural sectors making use of industrial buildings, but some complain that after revitalization they cannot afford the industrial building units anymore. So with this new scheme, we will designate 10% of the floor area for specific uses. And after a wholesale conversion, if some owners hope that certain floors can be used for transitional housing, we hope that we can exercise certain flexibility in the application of planning and building design requirements. For example, not all converted units may have windows, but if there is a common area where there's natural light and windows, that would be allowed. So we hope that by doing so, we can start this scheme. And then for redevelopment, we will be relaxing the floor area. An increase of 20% is allowed. We hope that this can become an encouragement for the owners. As for the 4th measure, we understand that for some industrial buildings, the ownership may be multiple, so it's very difficult for the owners to reach a consensus. So if industrial and non-industrial activities continue in the industrial building, well, in the past for non-industrial buildings, the owners would have to pay waiver fee, but it was too complicated. So now we have come up with these special arrangements. If the non-industrial activity doesn't attract big crowds, that would be tolerated. So for lower floors, we would also facilitate the conversions, but I'm not going to go into the details right now. In the coming 10 years, each year the construction volume would be about $250 billion. And Hong Kong is facing a lot of challenges in terms of construction. For example, our work power is aging and people have high expectation. So we are going to launch construction 2.0. We hope that we can implement innovation, professionalization, and revitalization in the construction 2.0 project. We want to promote the development of the construction industry. Well, the government hopes that the construction industry can be improved further. So we are now launching a 1 billion construction industry and technology fund. It was launched in October. The fund will encourage wide adoption of new but proven technologies among the industry, and we also hope to improve site safety. The fund will support industry practitioners and tertiary students to join various empowerment programs on latest construction technologies. And also, the Construction Institute is now built. We hope that we can train more professional construction practitioners and productivity can be enhanced. And I would also like to talk about lift modernization subsidy scheme. We propose to allocate $2.5 billion to this scheme, and just now at the last session we already discussed this. Well, we have talked in length about this, so you don't have to go into the details. So for the lift modernization subsidy scheme, there was just discussion earlier, so my presentation ends here. Thank you. Now it's time for members to ask questions. Let me read out the order. 鄭松泰、尹兆權、林卓廷、郭國旗、張永信、劉業強、Tommy 張、林美權、劉國勳、Elena Wong、Fernando 張、浩頓找、Chu Hoi-dick、陳志全、陳振英、Regina Ip, and then me. 許智峰、Frankie Yick、張國軍、Michael Chan、馬鳳國、Janice Ho. Please press the button if you want to speak. 4 minutes each member.
鄭松泰first. Thank you. I think most members are concerned about the Lantau Tomorrow Vision Plan. Much has been said about and concern made about the government pouring money into the sea. The Secretary would not agree, but let me quote what happened yesterday to show why the public has serious doubts about the scheme, even seeing it as a case of collusion between the business sector and government. Yacht owners in Discovery Bay protested yesterday, most of them expatriates, 50 to 60 of them. Many of them have stayed on the yachts at Discovery Bay for 20, 30 years. And lately, they received letters that they had to move out by the end of this year. So there are comments that, they may have breached marine ordinances living on the yachts. But you need to look at the background. The yacht club in Discovery Bay actually was built with a lot of gray areas and allowing them, the expatriates, to leave them for so long. And now suddenly they are asked to move out. They don't know what to do. And many of them are expatriates, as I said. So this example shows that back in the 1980s, the British government, in developing Discovery Bay, it outsourced to a developer, that is Hong Kong Property. And Hong Kong Property, after the announcement of the Lantau Tomorrow Vision Plan, its shares jumped by 7%. And the Secretary said that in the coming 20, 30 years, you will have reclamation of Cao Yichao. And the Discovery Bay residents got assistance from the government saying that maybe their yachts can be moored in Hailing Chao. So we're not talking about just 1 or 2 yachts, but at the same time, 200 yachts, 175 households, most of whom expatriates who are really at a loss. They really were actually at a loss, and they've bought or paying mortgage for the yachts, but they were kept in the dark. They were all of a sudden, asked to leave, and it seems like the yachts that they bought are not getting them anywhere. And this is what the government call public-private partnership. Discovery Bay is good, but now what happened is the residents feel that they have been abandoned, and the residents and yacht owners protested at the Outlying Island District Council yesterday. They were actually well behaved already. They spent millions on the yachts, and now they may have total loss. By the end of this year, what would I do? Maybe they just abandon the ships. So this is not about individual matter, but a matter about the society. This is what happened as a result of public-private partnership. So the Lantau to Moro Vision is another case of public-private partnership. The Discovery Bay case and also the case of Ma Wan shows you that so-called public-private partnership cannot be given confidence in. And Hailing Chao could be a similar case. So, Chairman, how can we deal with this? Secretary. Yes, I do agree that the 1,000 hectares of Cao Yichao should not be reclaimed. Why people are living on board yachts? That reflects the insufficient supply of housing. But a quick information here, Mr. Chang. The 1,000 hectares of Cao Yichao is Hailing Chao, as I said, is not to be touched yet. It will be in the next phase. And if there's reclamation in Cao Yichao, it will be a government move. The contractors would bid according to our tendering system. Next one, Andrew Wen. Thank you, Chairman. 4 minutes. On behalf of the Democratic Party, I'd like to express our dissatisfaction with the Lantau to Moro Vision plan. What I'm most dissatisfied with is me and other members, and also members of the public, joined the consultation stage by the task force on land supply, and now we feel that we are fooled. Now the chief executive came up with the Lantau to Moro Vision plan without waiting for the report being released by the task force. So why such a rush? Why? And also, why do you need to propose the plan earlier than expected? And also, the information provided, as the secretary said, you said that the cost estimate given by the chief executive is just a rough guess. But given that, how can the public and electrical support your plan? Not to mention that there's been so much controversy over and concern about the reclamation in the middle of the sea. So why all of a sudden such a rushed plan? And also it's like the chief executive, you created a task force on land supply. We asked this many times, in electrical sitting and so forth, and the questions on the golf course, and she never answered our questions. And now you are jumping the queue in making a proposal. And PPP psychology claims that this is something like, PPP just shows that this is sort of a plot that you've hatched. So the secretary is smart. You said that you mentioned about the situation of the task force on land supply. So I think to us, we think that, as you mentioned, in all new development areas, you will go for the route of NDA, developing new towns. And if there's a need for government land, then you can resume the land nearby. But now your latest proposal is strange. In that, I think it will be big developers who will join your plan, I think. But for those developers, they have applied for years for use of land because of planning issues, and now you're giving them the green light, and you are even giving them the dowry, and providing them with the facilities so that, like farmlands now could be converted into residential buildings to get profits or to produce profits for the developers. So it's like really a transfer of interest from the government to the developers. And also, I don't understand. As the secretary said, you have had a consistent system. So why can't you go for the current system arrangements for individual owners of plot owners, and they may not have an overview of the planning needs. And if you just cater to these individual landowners, and that may not really solve the entire housing issue or land issues in Hong Kong. Secretary, in terms of the vision, on various occasions I told the media that this is the government's judgment, that the policy address announced on October 10th, when it was announced, we said that we were waiting the response from the task force, and the chief executive proposed the figure of 1,700 hectares. But if you look at it more carefully, in phase 1, it's more concrete. There's a timetable attached. That's just 1,000 hectares in that phase, and that matches what has been discussed by the task force on land supply. I think at the end of December, the task force will submit its report to the government, and the report will be of much reference value. And Mr. Wen also mentioned the chief executive's points, but she never said that she had come up with any cost estimate. She said she didn't know, but only said, say for example, 500 to 600 billion. To me, reclamation, it will be 1,300 to 1,500 per square feet. But as for the alignment of transportation routes and the support facilities, we need to wait for the proposals of the task force before we can give you a definite figure on the cost. Lam Cheting, you said that the Development Bureau oversees the Housing Department, which is also responsible for monitoring building safety in Hong Kong. And lately, we've seen in news reports more than once about the Housing Department. Back in 2015, it discovered that in the Sha Tin Central Link had 77 steel bars and diaphragm walls for steel bars being removed. And in 2015, the Housing Department also issued an abstract on problems with the project, and the news reports also showed the email exchanges of Housing Department to other parties, which showed that there are 4 substandard projects. What's most worrying is that some emails sent by the Housing Department found that it had found irregularities reflecting problems or flaws in management of the work sites, and they could arouse public concern. If the situation is not corrected, there should be problems, and the department asked for an emergency meeting. So, Secretary, you were not a secretary then, but now have you looked at and checked whether the Bureau had received any information or reports about the emails, the concerns raised by the Housing Department? You know that, Mr. Lam, there's an independent inquiry underway now on the problems associated with the Sha Tin Central Link. The Buildings Department is due to testify in the inquiry. So please excuse me, I can't give you an answer now. But the Buildings Department is due to testify. And once the Committee of Inquiry has finished its work, Mr. Lam, well, I can answer any questions you have. Well, the independent inquiry is an independent inquiry, but you, as part of the administration, please look at the basic law, Article 64. Hong Kong SAR government must comply with the laws and be accountable to the electoral and answer electoral members' questions. Now I have put a question before you, and this question will not affect the investigation being done by the Committee of Inquiry. You can just state facts. Whether you stay at the inquiry or not at this meeting, it's the same. Why can't you tell us your answers here, Mr. Lam? I think you know the independent investigation when it's underway. Any revelation of facts might, we need to be concerned that it might affect the independent inquiry currently underway. But if it's facts, it wouldn't undermine the outcome of the inquiry unless you are telling us a different information here. Mr. Lam, I'm sure you're familiar with the process. For facts, information to be looked at by the Committee of Inquiry, then we don't know what sort of information could actually pose an impact on the public. Well, given your logic, I need to given your logic, does that mean that I can't ask you any questions about the Sha Tin Central Link scandal? I think it shows that you are not being accountable to that show. You cannot dodge my questions. I'm just asking you for facts, but not specific opinions. I'm just asking you for facts. Did you ever receive the report from the Buildings Department? Director of Buildings, could you answer instead? I'm asking the Director of Buildings Department now. I'm speaking on behalf of the SAR government. Indeed, there is this investigation currently underway through the Committee of Inquiry. The PIP debate, are we not going to have the PMP debate then, given your logic? Does it mean that show is powerless? Kokaki next. Chairman, I think the policy address about it was most displeasing to the public. And as shown by the mass protest a week ago, shows that this reclamation project is really unwelcome. It's like pouring money to the sea, and it would have dire consequences for the future generations. The government just briefed us on the plan, like URA's conversion of industrial buildings, using brownfields and so forth. The 1,200 hectares land, 230 of them will be used for building flats. The land owned by the government, whether it's the 1,000 hectares of land being held by the developers, and also vacant farmlands, and 2,700 vacant military lands, 170 hectares of golf course, each of them, or the 900 hectares of land reserved for small houses. If you work on any of them, you can fulfill the requirement of the Task Force on Land Supply in terms of land supply. But the problem is asking, why are you opting for the most risky, costly option instead? Mrs. Carrie Lam, when she was asked why the figure is raised from 1,000 hectares to 1,700 hectares, she said she didn't know. And she said maybe the planning department would brief her. But even the chief executive, it seems, is not clear about what's happening. And you can see what has happened to our government, how our government has deteriorated. Even if you want to cheat people, if you want to swindle people out of the money, you need to give them a reason. And yet, this time, there's no fixed amount offered. Now that the Secretary said it's only $150 billion, can you guarantee that will be the maximum? We're not talking about a long-term reclamation project. We have seen cost overruns of infrastructure projects to the extent of 50%. So what will we have to pay in the end? And lastly, just then the permanent secretary said that the government can provide 610,000 units, and each household with, assuming with 2.8 members, that means that by 2046, Hong Kong's population will be $8.2 million. So that means the extra land with the reclamation can house 1.1 million people. So who will be the people? The 620,000 people to be living in the lands reserved for public housing may not be natives of Hong Kong. So are we providing housing for people from the Greater Bay Area? Okay, Mr. Kwok, we said that the Chau, we need 1,000 of lands, of reclaimed land, and what is our population projection? In 2030 plus, the $8.2 million million people is the basis. But there's a buffer of 800,000, that is a maximum of 9 million. Do we have enough land? Why is there an extra or buffer of 800,000? That's just a buffer figure. Let me finish my story first, maybe. And if you look at it from another perspective, in 2030 plus, several documents have been issued, and the task force also discussed it. What are we short of? We are short of 1 million flats through various efforts, including, as I said, building tall buildings, very tall buildings. What we could find so far is 600,000 flats. But the 600,000 flats, Mr. Kwok, if you have followed up on the issue, the town planning board, we lost one land that has 3,700 flats. And Qingyu need to reduce a project to 1,000 odd flats. So we may not be able to completely meet a target of 600,000 units. So how about the other expected needs? So in New Territories North, there could be a need for 255,000 units. That is people living there. That is a need for 80,000 units to accommodate all the people. And County Chau reclaimed land, we're expecting to accommodate 400 people. That is 150,000 households altogether. So all our works here, the construction projects, are not ready to accommodate huge population. People ask me at the press conference whether the reclamation is the only option. I said no, but to the government, we feel that the phase 1 reclamation of Chau, we think that that's the best option. We will recommend it to the public, because if we don't reclaim the 1,000 hectares of land, we will not be able to accommodate the 400,000 to 700,000 people, while we continue with our building of tall buildings, in high density tall buildings. And also the population growth is in the new territories, mainly, whether it's Fannan North, Kutung North, Hon CHU Hoi-dick South, and New Territories North. All those new development areas are in the NT. Are we continuously to put people in the new territories? Is that the best way out? So our proposal, that's the rationale behind our proposal.
Mr. Winston Jiang, I'm also concerned about Lantau Tomorrow Vision. I think reclamation is a good way to increase land supply. The task force on land supply has completed its consultation exercise, and the report is due to be submitted. And then I think the government was a bit impatient in making some announcement in the policy address. So I think it would have been better if the government waited until December. There are 90,000 households in subdivided flats. They're waiting to be housed in our public housing estates. Can you tell us whether, with all sorts of reclamation completed, we can reduce the waiting time for public housing, so that people can find a reason to support you? Well, there was no other way. In 2017, the CE said in the policy address that the task force will be established to conduct public consultation. And if in October 2018, what the CE could say, was that she's waiting for the report from the task force. That would not be an acceptable approach. Actually, for a more concrete part, we're talking about 1,000 hectares of land to be reclaimed at Khao Chau. That's the same as what the task force told the public. I believe the report submitted by the task force would have a very high reference value for the proposed reclamation. At present, the waiting time for PRH is 5 years. If we want to catch up, we need to do more in terms of advanced preparation at the planning stage and the procedures handled by the Legislative Council. We need to shorten the time required for different processes. Otherwise, things will remain unsatisfactory. You should respect the reports to be submitted by the task force on land supply. They spend so much time on the consultation, so you must do everything to ensure the integrity of the task force report. There are so many people living in subdivided flats, and they're waiting for PLH. If you tell people that with all these initiatives implemented, you can shorten the waiting time to 3 years, and I think the public would find it more acceptable. I understand your views, but we have to be realistic. We're not just talking about reclamation of a certain scope, but if we cannot produce more land, the waiting time cannot be shortened. We need to speed up the different processes, including the funding processes and the planning processes. And that's why the CE has said that we need to build more consensus in the community for different processes involved. Of course, the significant proposal in the policy address is the Lantau Tomorrow vision. We have been supportive of reclamation to produce more land and to promote the long-term development and economic development of Hong Kong. And that reclamation will also facilitate the development of NT and Lantau. According to some people on the Lantau, it seems that the road alignment under the new vision is somewhat different from previous documents. For example, the previous study and the 2030 plus, during which there were public consultation exercises, and the alignment of the road that we were told would be linking up with Tung Chung and Tai Yu South and Lantau South. They've been waiting for decades for this north-south road on Lantau. And now the road alignment envisaged in the Lantau Tomorrow vision is one that would be somewhat closer to Discovery Bay. And it's very different from the one contained in the 2030 plus study. People there would like to get good roads. They support reclamation. So I would like to know what the plan is for the north-south connection. Will the road end up in Mui Wo and Lantau South, or just Tung Chung? Would you consider a coastal road from Tai O to Tung Chung? For the first phase involving Tai Yi Chau. When it's completed, traffic on Lantau will be much improved. There will be railway to Sunny Bay. There will be a Sunny Bay station, and to Lantau North, there will be Route 11 at northeast Lantau. If that can be done, then the residents in Tung Chung will get an additional route to the Hong Kong Island, because they now rely solely on the on Ching Ma Bridge for external connectivity. Next year, we're going to come to this council to seek funding approval for a study to be conducted. We can explore the options at that point. We'll consider various factors, including conservation. But this is not related to the proposed Kao Yi Chau reclamation. Well, the road alignment can certainly be improved to take into account population, tourist destinations, and the airport project. I think Mui Wo has a bigger need than vis-a-vis Discovery Bay. Mr. Tommy Zhang, I want to say a lot of things, so I'll be quick. Secretary, I don't have any information with me, but if my memory serves me right, back in the 1980s and 90s, the land reclaimed was 600 to 800 hectares. And towards the end of the 1990s, we reclaimed some 900 hectares of land. And I don't know what happened after that. That is before you announced that you wanted to reclaim 1,700 hectares of land. Well, would people think that this is too much? Given that the population is different now? But please check the benefits arising from past reclamations. The Liberal Party support this Lantau Tomorrow vision, but we understand that the public are concerned about certain issues. So please explain yourself clearly to the public on matters such as how you're going to spend the money. We hope you will not be spending a lot of time to implement this initiative. We suffer from a shortage of land, and without land, a lot of problems cannot be resolved. The CE talk about infrastructure and role first in development. And please don't repeat the past approach that you won't even provide a railway station if the population hasn't reached hundreds of thousands. People may not support reclamation because of traffic congestion. Whether we are talking about Ma Liu Shui or Shardin water treatment plant. Last time I put this question to Mr. Frank Chan, Secretary for Transport and Housing, and he sort of thought that the matter rests within your portfolio, and he thought maybe we should have the outline zoning plan first. So in other words, he thought that you should take the lead. And for the land sharing pilot scheme, you should not ask the landowner to surrender land for public housing or for roads. You should be more flexible. Don't use up all the land of a landowner, and at the end of the day, the landowner will not find it cost effective to develop the remaining land. Reclamation, when we talk about reclamation, we talk about appropriately scaled reclamation. But we will only proceed when the relevant issues are assessed and we are sure that certain safeguards are already there. in the NT for NDA, net reclamation for Zone A is $380, $1,380 per square foot. We have to reprovision existing facilities, and we want to rehouse the talents. So reclamations may not be more costly if we take into account such costs of land resumption. Hon CHU is just 10 km from from Central. It's just a little bit further away than the distance between Taikushing and Central. Please give us some information after the meeting, tell us that the number of hectares of land reclaimed, what the expenditures were incurred, and what benefits were gained. Yes, please do this in writing, Secretary. Ms. Alice Mack. We want to build a land bank. Well, we must build a land bank for Hong Kong.
嗰度咁就諗點樣去做翻啲規劃咁，所以
And we need land to do the planning. Without sufficient land, we cannot solve the housing problem. We need a steady land supply to solve this very difficult problem of housing. If we do not do more about land supply, if we fail to produce land, who stand to benefit, and when can we resolve housing problems? The task force has looked into various options. Well, I would say that all the options should be should be implemented concurrently, including the resumption of land under private recreational lease and the development of brownfield sites. According to the permanent secretary has talked about land resumption. Land resumption should also be implemented, because if you just resume land from the golf course, it will only give you a short-term solution. The government must produce sufficient land so that you can keep things under control. Otherwise, you'll be led. You will not be able to lead. The Land Town Tomorrow vision is a good concept, but after it was announced, the reaction in the community was not good, perhaps because you haven't explained yourself clearly. People are saying that this is tantamount to throwing money into the sea. So people are also asking who would be living on the reclaimed land, which is an island. Would they be provided with ferry service or other transport service? Can they go to work? Next year you are going to apply for funding approval for study, but what about the information that you should provide? Do you have to wait until you have submitted the application? Well, not today. This is not a good forum, because we are only given a few minutes. And if you give a partial picture, people may be even more alarmed. So I hope you find a suitable occasion to tell us in detail the comprehensive picture of how you may secure the long-term land supply so that we can resolve our housing problems. Well, let me think about this. I believe there will be such an occasion where we can do this. Perhaps even before the task force report is submitted, perhaps we can explain things on the basis of certain assumptions. I will consider your suggestions. I hope the government would present all the information it has got in relation to Land Town Tomorrow vision. Don't let this become a tool to attack the government. That would be most unworthy of the concept. We want to get a long-term solution of land supply. We want to resolve housing problems. And if people want to undermine this plan, you will not be able to get long-term solution. For this generation's problem, maybe you can cope by developing brownfield sites, but we need to get long-term solutions. Mr. Lock of Fund. Land is important. Without land, we cannot build more housing units. I support adopting a multi-pronged approach, reclamation, plus brownfield development, and also the turning agricultural land into housing sites. And I believe with land supply secured, you'll be able to steer future development. So when you say we should support the reclamation proposal, what are we talking about? Supporting the proposal to reclaim 1,000 hectares of land or 1,700 hectares of land? And we need to be informed about the housing units to be supplied and who are they for. And people think that the solution would only become a reality in the very long term and may not be good for short-term and immediate problems. And people have all sorts of misunderstanding. You talk about building another CBD, another central, and people are saying that you want them to become pioneer settlers. The Lantau Tomorrow vision is for the longer term, 2030 and beyond. Other plans are to develop the brownfield sites or agricultural land. Most of these sites are in the NT. Can we locate some of the government facilities or the commercial facilities in the NT so that it would the land would serve multiple service purposes? For example, NT East has all along been relying on the East Rail and the Tolo Harbour Highway. Can you consider relocating certain industries in NT North? And by that I mean the government should relocate some of your services and buildings there. And we have a lot of fallow land. Make the best use of it. It's a big waste. We need a lot of infrastructure to ease traffic congestion in NT. If improvement works are conducted in a piecemeal manner, can we really provide a solution? And you need to have a sizable land of 4,000 square meter before you can participate in the joint enterprise.
Secretary, I think Mr. Lau has asked a lot of questions on finance. Well, for Hon CHU, we definitely think that it can become our third core business districts, and Grade A commercial buildings to be built there. Now, other than Central, we have another CBD at Kwun Tong, and Hon CHU is only 10 kilometers from Central, so it does have the potential. But in NT North, there are more difficulties, so other activities should be carried out there. In the NT, we hope that Hon CHU can become another commercial center. But can we build a lot of Grade A commercial buildings there? It may not be that realistic. Okay, maybe you can provide the other answers in writing. Mr. Dr. Helena Wong, the Democratic Party objects to the Lantau Tomorrow vision. This reflects that the government under Carrie Lam is very authoritative or authoritarian. Well, when you did the land supply consultation, you didn't include the Lantau Tomorrow vision. Yes, I know you were talking about 1,000 hectares of reclamation at Lantau East, but it's not this plan. So even the task force on land supply is not happy. And now it's divided into 3 portions, a big one, a medium-sized one, and a small one. One is at East Lantau, and also for our Hong Kong Foundation, they have another suggestion. That's a reclamation area of 2,200 hectares. So there were these 2 consultations, and now Carrie Lam suddenly comes up with another idea, that is this Lantau Tomorrow vision. But the land supply consultation hasn't come up with this report yet, and now suddenly Mrs. Carrie Lam put forward this plan. I studied politics and administration, and now you suddenly come up with this idea. You don't support it with figures and data. How come 1,000 is suddenly turned into 1,700? Why don't you just turn it into 2,200? So are you going to use up our reserve, and trillions of dollars will be spent on this 1,700 hectare reclamation? Under this vision, we do not see any analytical data. Near-shore reclamation may be less costly, but in a deep water, if you build an artificial island, it can be very expensive. You just told us that for each square foot is $1,300 to $1,500. So is it near shore reclamation or the deep water reclamation at Khao Yi Chau? Can you give us the figures? No. And if you build this artificial island, well, actually you're building several artificial islands. You have to build several bridges and railways to connect them to the mainland. So you just told us that, well, whenever you build any new or develop any new area, you have to build bridges and roads. But I think that would be less expensive. Have you conducted any preliminary studies for this vision? We need concrete data to support your vision. If you are going to have a reclamation of 1,700 hectares, and you're going to build infrastructure, roads and railways, and you have to build the artificial islands, how much money are we talking about? Dr. Wong, just now I told you for each square foot is $1,300 to $1,500. That's exactly Khao Yi Chau that I was talking about. At Tung Chung, we are doing another reclamation. Is about 137 hectares, and the price tag is about $1,000 per square foot. But at least Lantau is a bit more expensive. The water is not too deep, 4 to 8 meters. We hope that in the first or second quarter of next year, we will come back to LegCo to apply for funding for the study. As for the infrastructure cost, I haven't told you yet because we are waiting for the final recommendation from the task force on land supply. So if the views can be incorporated into our plan, that would be great. Well, your time is up. Hon CHU. Thank you, Chairman. Well, with regard to the artificial islands at Central Waters, I understand that it may not be the ideal option for everyone. However, if all the other ways are not feasible, and we have to solve the problem of land supply for our future generations, then we really have to overcome this obstacle and move forward. I think people are concerned about the cost control concerning the future reclamation and also the scope of reclamation, because earlier on we were told that it will be 1,000 hectares and now it's increased to 1,700 hectares. How come it's bigger? People are very concerned about the scope. How come it's enlarged? I think the government has to explain to us clearly. And for these artificial islands, if we move forward, I hope the government can show us another vision. For this new artificial island, after it's built, can we do away with our old mistakes concerning town planning, for example, in terms of public transport, public space, a central park, greening, etc. So on this new artificial islands, can we plan without repeating our old mistakes? The government should show us such a vision, and this is my request. I have two questions. For the Lantau Tomorrow plan, you have shown us a map. I have some questions concerning the road alignments. If you are familiar with Lantau, you would see that the road will pass through Discovery Bay. But a few years ago, we were shown another map, and then at that time, that road passed through Mui War. So I would like to ask the government, have you changed the alignment of the road? Why is there such a change? Because for many years, we've been talking about a road passing through Mui War, but now it will pass through Discovery Bay. You have to explain to us clearly. Otherwise, well, a lot of Lantau people are Lantau residents are very concerned. Now, for NT West, the population has increased. If there are ways to connect them to the urban areas, can you build these roads before the artificial islands? Now I see a dotted line there. So from Qingyi to Lantau, there should be a connect road. So can we have this road before the artificial islands are completed? Thank you. I think you are talking about here on the map. That is at the northeastern tip near Ma Wan. There should be a road to Qingyi. Well, that is Route 11. I think the government has explained that they will look at the possibility of building this road. Well, we've been talking about Route 11. That's before the proposal of the artificial islands. So how about the alignment concerning Discovery Bay and Mui War? Now, if you look at the 700 hectares at Hailing Chow, these are conceptual scenarios. So if we do reclamation at Hailing Chow, the alignment is still at a conceptual stage now, so it's too early for us to decide on the exact alignment of the road. Mr. Edichu. I really pity the civil service team. Now the Western District is our second ruling authority, but now there is a third ruling authority, which is led by Hon CHU Hoi-dick, our former CE, and his our Hong Kong Foundation. So who is the CE now? Is Mrs. Carrie Lam the CE or Hon CHU Hoi the CE now? So for the civil servants team, they were studying 2030, and we were told that we lack 1,200 hectares. But do you have a new study? So that's why we are looking at 1,700 hectares now. You haven't conducted a study, and you are just following Hon CHU Hoi-dick's proposal. It says that, no, it shouldn't be 1,000. It should be 2,200. So you just divide it by half and say now we need 1,700. So I think the civil servants are really at a loss because our CE is working in this manner. In the past few months, the government has been making use of the 90,000 households living in subdivided flats. They say that they are living in terrible conditions, so we must come up with a solution with them. So what is the solution? I think you are giving us a vision which can only be realized 20 or 30 years later. So what do the 90,000 people living in subdivided flats need? Have you asked them? I've asked them. What do they need? They need transitional housing. They need transitional housing. But what is the policy address talking about? Now, if you want to know whether the government has the heart to do something, you just look at one thing. That is where it puts its money. Just now, the secretary was talking about industrial building. Well, it's just a policy. You just waive certain fees, and then the industrial buildings can be turned into transitional housing. So you are not committed to it. How many transitional housing units can be built? I think just 1,000 or 2,000. Well, you're talking about 20 or 30 years down the road. You talk about East Lantau. Yes, we may need that, but you should come up with short-term solutions so that you can explain to the 90,000 people who are living in subdivided flats. Well, Soko has asked a property developer for a site so that about 900 transitional housing units can be built, and the cost is about $3 million. And 300 hectares of government land or vacant land has been identified by another NGO for transitional housing. So can you spend $19 billion on building transitional housing units instead? Well, for transitional housing, I think under Mr. Frank Chan, there is a working group, and they are working very hard on that. Because the government doesn't want to take up the responsibility. You just have the policy. You do not take up the responsibility, and you are not investing with land or money. Ray Chan, I object to the Lantau Tomorrow vision. Well, a lot of people have taken to the road to object to this. Now, you must have seen the banners. You are dumping money into the sea, and you will harm future generations. You are choosing the more difficult path rather than the easier paths, etc. So for those who support Lantau Tomorrow, what exactly are you supporting? 1,000 hectares, 1,700 hectares, or without limits? Even if the government says 3,000 hectares, you will still support it. Why is it so messy? Well, originally you said that there would be a reclamation of 1,000 hectares, and Mrs. Carrie Lam said that suddenly changed it to 1,700 hectares. And I think you have made our secretary, you have given him a very hard time. Well, now you're telling us that for phase one is 1,000 hectares, and in total there will be 1,700 hectares. I also have this postcard is produced by the Sustainable Lantau Office. So for these artificial islands here, what's the area? Is it 1,000 or 1,700 hectares? When did you know that it was expanded to 1,700 hectares? We have always been told that it would be 1,000 hectares, and suddenly the policy address told us it's changed to 1,700 hectares. Well, even the task force on land supply is surprised. Well, you are telling us for phase one is 1,000 hectares. You can inflate it to 2,000 or 3,000. It doesn't mean anything. And Mrs. Carrie Lam just suddenly blow it up to 1,700 hectares. You say that will be sufficient for generations. So, Secretary, when do you know that it was changed to 1,700, or you have known all along? And in the paper, you say that according to preliminary technical assessment at Khao Yi Chau and Hailing Chau, some artificial islands can be constructed. So who did the preliminary technical assessment? Is it our Hong Kong Foundation, or is the planning department, or the CEDD? Can you make the technical assessment more transparent? Mr. Chen, I've repeated this answer many times. Well, the task force started its work on the 26th of April, and when it talked about East Lantau Metropolis, it was 1,000 hectares. But in 2030 plus, how much land do we lack? 1,200 hectares. So if you look at the task force consultation paper, it pointed out that we really do not have enough land, and it also said that we should have a land reserve. And in June, we officially started thinking about the policy address. We look at these two opinions. It's not just the task force views, and I think there were a lot of voices. Internally, the planning department and the CEDD look at the issue, and we try to find out how many more hectares we could create. And then we came to the answer of 1,700 hectares. If it's more, maybe the water current would be too fast. And if we move further eastwards, is the navigational path. And if we make it bigger, we may affect the marine life. So after considering all this, we've come up with the figure of 1,700 hectares. There were a lot of discussions, and there were certain proposals that were accepted, some were not accepted. And then on the 24th of September, the task force gave a letter to Mrs. Lam, and they have suggested a several-pronged approach, and we have to be prepared for worst days. So Mrs. Carrie Lam decided on the figure of 1,700. So how about this postcard? Is it 1,000, 1,700? When was it printed? For this postcard, I didn't know when it was printed. I can't remember it. Mr. Chau Hoi-dick asked a question. Please give me time to answer his question. So what will the government do in the coming days? Now we will be focusing on the 1,000 hectares of Khao Yi Chau. We will conduct a study on the engineering feasibility, etc. And we have also been looking at Chang Chau South. So as we are doing this study on central waters, we will try to get some basic data concerning Khao Yi Chau, and for Chang Chau South, we will also try to collect preliminary data.
Chen Chunying, well, I hope the information I've got can address Tommy Jones' information. Hong Kong's land area is 1,061 square kilometers, and in 2017 it increased by 50 square kilometers, 4.7% on average, an increase of 131 hectares every year, mainly from reclamation. In Singapore, the speed of new land provided by reclamation is lately it came to 721 square kilometers, 103 square kilometers, 16.7%. Every year, about 200 hectares. That means double the amount in Hong Kong. So over the past 30 years, Hong Kong lagged largely behind Singapore in terms of creating new land. So I actually mentioned this information in other panels. I support reclamation, but on the concept of land title provision, the chief executive suggested 1,700 hectares of land to be provided. And then later on, she qualified by saying that the initial stage is for the reclamation of 1,000 hectares. So the two-phase concept, is it mainly in response to the options provided by the task force on land supply, or is it based on scientific information, or, for example, due to effects of the scale of exercise, or is it because of the transportation links needed for the artificial islands? The reclamation for that is divided into 4 parts. But why can't there be 3 phases or 4 phases instead, so that we can see what sort of medium-term, long-term options there are for our consideration? Whether it's 1 or 4 phases, we all need to wait for the consultation report of the task force. Do you have to wait for the report to be out first? Above all, I think, Mr. Chen, you're right in saying that we need to look at the detailed report from the consultant, but we do have our own thinking. We think the 1,000 hectares in the phase 1 is appropriate. It's not just about that. I explain why the leap from 1,000 to 1,700, as the overall plan. We need to consider all sorts of factors. If we create 1,700 hectares of land at the same time, engineering-wise, is it feasible? Well, as we said earlier on, even for the water desalination plants, the construction of that has to be done in 2 phases, because that involves better control of resources. But Mr. Chen, you're right. Ultimately, does it have to be 1,000 hectares in the first phase? If the consultant said 900 hectares is appropriate, then we can go for that. That's what the chief executive said too. But our concept now is, the basis for now is 1,000 hectares in the first phase. I also saw that there's an option by the government in the proposal to have multi-story development. That is, there can be single site, multiple uses. This is a good attempt, good thinking. But I wonder whether the government has come up with other support measures, like in Chunwan. You said that the methadone rehab center and the community centers that could be lumped together. But do you think such community centers can be lumped together as part of the development? What sort of criteria do you adhere to? Well, land is so valuable in Hong Kong. We want to make good use of it. In the days ahead, the Development Bureau and the Government Property Agency will have a workshop together, and we'll see how we can make good use of the land and the sites available. In due course, I'll come back to explain the details to members. Thank you. Next one is Regina Ip, Chairman for PPP. That is the land sharing pilot scheme. In principle, I'm not opposed to that. But I want to point out that the task force on land supply for the PPP in Sha Tin, Utah, that was a project led by the government. There was an outline zoning plan as well. The government made the plan and then invited developers to reclaim the land. It's not like, as you conceive, that the developers would exchange lands with you, because that's more risky. I'm also opposed to, as mentioned in your paper, to build mainly subsidized housing for sale. I don't know whether it's flats for first-time owners. If that's the case, I would oppose that, because we are so short of land. You should not be building flats for those households making $70,000 or above a month. The urgency now is for us to provide housing for those living in subdivided flats or those in very poor living conditions. You shouldn't, because developers don't like to see public housing around their size, that you want to create the flats for sale. I've actually written a motion, and I know that the Democratic Party is opposed to PPP. Of course, if there's more land, I welcome more housing, but the priority should be for people in the queue for public housing, those living in subdivided flats, those who are in dire need of housing. We're not supposed to encourage people to buy flats here. You all know, Secretary, now with the trade war between U.S. and China, and bank analysts have said that if unemployment increases next year, many shops in Guangdong may have to close, and property prices might fall by 40%. So the government should not feel obliged to build housing for people because the prices will come down naturally. So you don't need to create subsidized flats mainly. So I'm opposed to the scheme. I know many developers don't like to see home ownership scheme flats or public housing in their sites. They want to build luxury flats so that they can sell more flats. And then you also call it a pilot scheme. Before you submitted it to the EXCO, you submitted the pilot scheme, the plan, to the Land and Development Advisory Committee. But why is the case? I don't want to be a rubber stamp, even though I'm an executive councillor. Don't give us a paper on Friday and ask me to endorse it on Tuesday. If that's the case, I will oppose it based on basic law. Don't try that trick. So, Secretary, would you answer? Who come up with such bad ploy or trick? Well, on housing supply, Mrs. Yip, you brought a point which I want to share with you. The market for housing prices, of course, will fluctuate, but as we stated clear, we will not, whether the property prices rise or fall, we will not stop our work, nonetheless, in creating land. Otherwise, to a certain stage, we'll come back to the same issue and face the same dilemma. And the chief executive told us that, and she made it clear, that 60 to 70% of the floor area will be used for public housing. She has some thinking on that, but I haven't got any ideas of the concrete plans, but there's still room for exploration. What we are planning to do, public housing, does it include flats for first-time homeowners? Well, I think we need to wait till the task force submits a report by the end of the year and see what the task force says, what is written. We should help those who are poorest. We don't need to help people who are making $70,000 a month. It's the decision where to buy a flat. If there's more land available, property prices will come down naturally and they can afford it. Okay, now it's my time. The policy address, the most explosive news must be a reclamation for Lantau. Tomorrow Vision. I'm not opposed to reclamation myself, but the scale of it and the times of reclamation need to be explained by the government. And based on the Lantau Tomorrow Vision, what it entails is really exciting to me, makes me want to support it. The reclamation near Khao Chau, as shown on the map you gave us, this reclaimed site will be close to Hong Kong Island. There will be a rail network and roads going to Yunnan, to Mun. So that means in the future there could be smooth transportation links helping new territories west to Mun, Yunnan, and also outlying island residents. I asked some residents for their views and asked them, say, before the artificial islands were built, currently there's always heavy congestion in the area, even leading to the airport. So if from your perspective, would you urge other government departments to speed up the transportation infrastructure work? Just then you said that there must be infrastructure, transportation networks first before other buildings should be built. From Tuen Mun all the way to Sunny Bay, there could be a route, as suggested by our district councillors. It would have the effect of the Tuen Mun-Tuen Wan link, and that will help materialize your vision. I've also heard from some island district council members, In 2030 plus, your proposal on transport is that there should be a line running through Mui Wall and then go to Discovery Bay. So the residents said that they used to support you, but now they can't anymore because the link seems to be is now diverted to Discovery Bay. But just then you said that you are still studying the network, so there's no concrete suggestion or proposal yet. But then there are people who are now wavering in their support for your plan. So, Secretary, could you clarify as soon as possible and give us concrete plans so that we all know what the vision is like? At least they would know that the reclamation will really bring benefits to them. So thank you. Thanks, Chairman, for pointing out. It's also mentioned in the policy address that Chau, with the support of the transportation links, would ease the congestion, very, very heavy congestion in New Territories West. And just then you said whether we can expedite the infrastructural works. I said in my answer to Hon CHU, route number 1, that has been under discussion. Route 11, and where there'll be a link to nearby areas. In the study of Route 11, they will further look at the other elements of the road network. As for the alignment on Lantau, I can only repeat what I've said. If we have concrete ideas for the alignments now, then in 2025, when reclamation begins, and when 2030, the first batch of residents move in near Chau, that's for Chau, but for Chau, they have to wait further. Next one, Tet Hui. I want to ask you about East Lantau, but that has been asked. So I want to know, in the policy address, there's mention of conservation of heritage. And in the paper it says that there'll be various measures on heritage conservation. Is making progress and is moving forward smoothly. I'm sure progress has been made. But I've also seen some controversial projects that remain unresolved. Not to mention the Central Post Office, and you want to demolish it, and you haven't graded it when people want to keep it as an heritage. Internationally, it's been graded as or seen as being of heritage value. So in Central, the ex-Victoria Barracks project, you have asked the Jockey Club to carry out revitalization there, and 2 years the canopies collapsed, and you penalized a scapegoat, a contractor. And now 2 years have passed, and we've seen that the revitalization scheme is only about improving on the exterior, whereas the structural elements, the historical parts inside, like the wooden staircases and the rare stone cases which are of heritage value, they're all removed. And then in their place now are multi-purpose room venues used by the Jockey Club to make profits by taking advantage or maximizing the use of the floor area. So what kind of conservation is it? So Secretary, you as the Antiquities Authority, you approved all these plans. Why would you approve them? I was surprised to see that you have approved all that. Are you aware of what I'm saying? Yes, thank you. I may not be able to give you all the detail about every single project, but right now we have quite a good system in dealing with historic buildings. But the Jockey Club Central Police Station project is a huge one. We may not agree totally on, how to deal with or conserve or make use of each floor, each room in a heritage building. But the Jockey Club project is totally non-profit making. It has put in a lot more money than what it has gained as profits from it, from the central project. The handling of individual rooms, sites, actually was discussed by a relevant committee. members of the public are welcome to express their views to the committee. But if you think that it's different from what you had in mind, then it's your view. But we have got experts going to the site to see what should be done with the various facilities. Can I possibly override the decision? Legally, I could, but in reality, I try to respect the views of the relevant experts. Let me supplement. I'm not talking about my view. I'm talking about the Antiquities and Monuments Authority's experts who came up with the report that the heritage, including the stone staircases and the wooden floors staircases, are of conservation value. They are the views of your own experts, and now they've been demolished. I know Jockey Club is running on a self-financing basis. From that project, I can't see you as the Antiquities Authority has shown any sincerity in enhancing conservation in Hong Kong. I'm very disappointed with you. Next one, Frankie Yick. Just then, another member of my party, Tommy Cheung, stated his views on the Lantau project, so I'm not going to repeat what he said. In paragraph 10, about brownfield sites in the new territories, some people have said, oh, that's just the buildings, or have buildings, built on the brownfield sites. But the government's paper has mentioned several times the economic value of the brownfields. I know the government now is carrying out a study on how to accommodate the needs there. The brownfields do create and have created a lot of employment opportunities. I know that those with operations on the sites are willing to move out. It's just about where they can afford the future rents in alternative sites. It's not about compensating them and then they'll move out alone. The operators want to carry on with their business. So the government, please pay attention. You are doing a study on the financial feasibility, so you can see whether you can provide the operators with reasonable rents in the future. I hope you can find a good answer in the end. And then also about revitalization of industrial buildings. Our sector in 2010 and 2016, when the first game was launched, our constituency was affected. Those in Kwun Tong, Cheung Sha Wan, the old industrial buildings used to charge very low rents, rented out as warehouses. But after revitalization, they have to be moved out because of the rent hikes. So therefore, some have actually moved to brownfield sites to continue their operations because they're cheaper. So now with the new round of revitalizing industrial buildings, I hope that the government can see, in some districts, you may keep some areas for the logistics industry so that they can have room for survival. So please consider, the operation of the logistics sector. Yeah, thank you for mentioning revitalizing industrial buildings plans. You know that we had 2 years ago, we stopped application for the phase 1. How many more applications are we getting? It's difficult to estimate, but I think we can continue. We should continue with it. And now we're more stringent with the conversion within those buildings. The exemption fees are in place, and this time we're also getting one more requirement.
And that is 10% of the floor space must be for cultural-related activities. We would like to see if this works out. The member has mentioned brownfield sites. There are 2 studies which would reach a mature stage in 2 to 3 months. We are also mindful of the concerns of the member. In Hon CHU Hoi-dick, we are going to recover 190 hectares of brownfield sites, and only 6 to 7 hectares are in the logistics industry. So the resumption would mean that they can no longer operate there, but that's just unavoidable. Well, I did participate in your consultation exercise. And the task force on land supply also touched on this aspect. They mentioned whether you can have a reclamation at Lung Ku Tan. because there are logistics operations involving heavy machinery. We support the proposal to look at Long Kutan. I wonder if the policy address has mentioned anything about this. Well, yes, it's been mentioned in the policy address. Mr. Cheung Kok-kwan, I support reclamation as proposed in the policy address, but I'm a bit worried by the current situation. We don't have sufficient land, and we have a lot of people living in subdivided flats, and housing problem remains a major concern. It's been a perennial problem. We have not yet found a solution. We've come up with different options, such as collaboration with landowners. Then we are accused of collusion, and then we talk about fringe of country parks. Then we are accused of not being pro conservation. You know, many people are good at raising questions and pointing out that there are problems, but very few people are able to come up with solutions.
真係冇困難嘅。
Well, if developing brownfield sites is a problem-free process, we wouldn't be in the situation now as we are in now. Well, we have been talking about different initiatives and solutions for many years, and we're not seeing an abundant supply of housing flats. These are real problems that we need to address. I support reclamation, but as a matter of fact, after the policy address was delivered, many people have raised questions and expressed concerns. Some would say that we have land. Do you need to reclaim so much land? And reclamation takes a long time. In the meantime, I don't have anywhere to, any place to meet my housing needs. All these problems have been raised by those people we talk to. The government has the obligation to answer questions like these. I'm not asking for a paper for members. I'm talking about the day after the policy address was delivered, today, and also tomorrow. Please tell us what you think. For example, the scale of reclamation, you are talking about 1,000 hectares or 1,700 hectares. Apart from housing needs, we need other facilities. We need to attract investors. We need international schools to do that. We need residential and care homes for the elderly, but we don't have land. Have you been able to tell people the true picture? Mr. Chen Chi-chin said that reclamation means throwing money into the sea, and it would adversely affect the next generation. Well, I do have children. I'm not concerned about wasting money. I'm concerned that in the future my children will ask me why we didn't do the right thing and create land back some years ago. I hope you will do more to explain your policies to assure people. I don't think you have time to speak again, Secretary. Maybe you can talk to Mr. Cheung Kok-kwan in great detail outside the meeting. We have still got a large number of members waiting to speak, so I will extend the meeting time by 15 minutes. 3 members have moved a motion without notice. We need to deal with that before we end our meeting at 6:15. Mr. Michael Tin, 400,000 people living in NT near Samchan. They want a railway route. And in Yunnan South, people have to wait for 3 trains before they can board one. And there will be hundreds of thousands of people moving to new development areas. Therefore, in 2013, you may have forgotten this. I propose this railway line from Tuen Mun South and along the coast. It would cross the sea to Sunny Bay and then to Khao Chau and then linking up with Island West, Hong Kong Island West. The beauty of this may not be understood by many people. For people living in Shenzhen, they can take a bus to Xiulam and then they can access the urban area through this railway. So this would serve the 400,000 people living there and the new population that would move there in the future. This is the policy address plan. It's similar. It looks similar. So I definitely welcome this proposal. I've done the homework for you. I've asked some friends. I asked them if the government doesn't spend a dollar on this, and if they are given sites to build some buildings, how much would they need in terms of floor space? They need 10,000 square feet. Well, you are going to provide a building size. It would mean sites for private buildings and some commercial uses. So I believe giving them 10,000 square feet in return for the railway will be a good deal for you. And then you can pay for the reclamation, the island, and also the drainage and the road projects. So you get a railway for free, and you also get some revenue. So do you agree with the figures that I've mentioned? And I asked Mr. Edward Yao yesterday that nowhere in other places of the world can you find within a half hours of traveling from the airport, you have a theme park. If we have a multiple purpose racing track for motorists, you would attract a lot of visitors. Mr. Yao says a study will be conducted. Are you going to? Can you confirm that you are looking into this? Well, we've been talking about the cost of reclamation, 1,300 and 1,500 per square foot as cost. As for other expenditure, we'll have to wait for the task force report first. Spanning over a period of 10 to 15 years, I would say that the cost is affordable. We also look into the idea of Sunny Bay reclamation. Yes, that will be done. Mr. Junius Ho, I would like to start by saying that I support the Lantau reclamation proposal. The scale should be determined after the experts have done the assessment. Where do you get the material for land for reclamation? You have to remove earth from hills. We must develop Lantau. That's the right way to go. The size on Lantau is 15,000 hectares. So go ahead with Khao Chau project. Make sure that the planning is done nicely, so that the young people can climb the social ladder. If you want to go to live in mid-levels, you have to at least pay $60,000 to $70,000 per square foot. If you have a reclamation on Lantau, you allow them to move out the social ladder. I've just returned from the opening ceremony of Hong Kong Zhuhai Macau Bridge. Now the connection is there, so the focus point must be to the west of Hong Kong. So don't do it bit by bit on Lantau and in Sai Kung. You must take forward the Lantau tomorrow vision. Don't be fooled by people who say this is a disaster. If they do think so, they shouldn't live in Hong Kong. And I don't think it's a good idea to do reclamation in Long Gu Tan. What's the land going to be for? There are thousands of residents there. If you want to improve the environment of Changzhou, or you can have the obnoxious facilities improved, that would be good. But it's not a good idea to reclaim land there. We must first of all think through the ideas. If you pay people $1,000 or so for rent resumption, they won't thank you. And even old tricks can be good. Let's go back to the previous arrangement of issuing letter B to landowners, so the landowners share the proceeds of development. Mrs. Yip has shown me her motion. I say I agree. We should resolve housing problems. What the government should do is to provide public housing. Well, Singapore has done it. Back then, they sent people to learn from Hong Kong. Their public housing program is so good. The government should resume land for public housing. But if you have the land sharing pilot scheme asking for people to surrender brownfield sites, then you should give them letter B in exchange, whether it's in the future you have land available in Khao Yi Chao, and perhaps it would be better for these people to share the proceeds. Mr. Chan Kim Bo, for those who object to reclamation, they will ask the government to resume the brownfield sites and to take back military sites. But these measures are difficult. There's a cost to the resumption. You need to accommodate the displaced operators. The opposition has never been able to convince me why these measures will work, since they have not worked for years. And now, since the old methods don't work, and we should go for a new approach. Reclamation would give us an assured supply of 1,700 hectares. Some say this would cost us $1 trillion. Let's assume that is correct. But we can recoup the trillion from land sale, and we can have hundreds of $billions gained through the other facilities. If you want to get details, please visit my Facebook account, and more than thousands of people have done so. The opposition see nothing but risk, and they always try to stir up the conflicts between local people and new immigrants. Objection without good cause is no good. Well, we have wasted a lot of time. If we had made this decision more than 10 years ago, we will have the land available. So these are misbehaving people. Do you have new solutions? And why don't we try out this new solution, and we would also gain some benefits out of it. And you would deal with brownfield site. You make use of the land resumption ordinance. You have a land sharing pilot scheme. These are all the methods, well thought out methods. Well, the team led by the Secretary for Development look very tired. Well, the public know that you have worked hard. Although the opposition has voiced objections, but in their hearts they know that you have been doing the right thing. I hope the government will not let up its efforts or succumb to the opposition. I have a difficult question for the Secretary, which is difficult to answer. Where are you going to submit your study report to the FC so that we can launch the measures right away? Well, the task force on land supply will submit its final report to the government by the end of December, and then we will carefully study it. And before we approach the FC, we will go to the district councils to solicit views. So in the first or second quarter next year, I believe we'll be in a position to approach the relevant panels of this council, and then the next step will be the Finance Committee. I think the major risk is climate change and natural disaster, but these can be resolved. These can be resolved through technical means. And lastly, I would advise you against losing faith. Dr. Lo Wai Kwok, when people of my age were in primary schools, we were told that land was created in Hong Kong through removing hills and reclamation. You know, Hong Kong has a hilly terrain, naturally speaking. And the colonial government started to create land in the 19th century so that we can accommodate a bigger population. I don't have all the figures with me. I've heard that if we count from the start of Hong Kong as a colony, we have reclaimed a few thousand hectares of land so far. And in the 15 years, from 1985 to 2000, we reclaimed 3,000 hectares of land. But in the 21 years since the establishment of the SAR government, because of litigation and so on and so forth, we have let down our efforts in reclamation. And if we tell people that under the Lantau vision tomorrow, we are going to reclaim land of the size of the airport, Chek Lap Kok Airport, plus the third runway, but the airport is about to get a bigger land with a reclamation of 650 hectares. So altogether, it has a size of 1,800 or 1,900 hectares. So it's not unachievable to start with.
So how many artificial islands should we build? Should we build a big one and some smaller ones? The government says that they are going to initiate a study first. They are not embarking on reclamation right away. So if we have land, we can build private residential buildings, public residential buildings. There can be commercial and industrial activities. Jobs can be provided. And in terms of transport, we must have a good network. Between Lantau and Hong Kong Island, we are building artificial islands. So such artificial islands should be connected to Hong Kong Island as well as Kowloon West. I think all this should be included in the study. But if we do not start today, our future generations will be harmed. I see some motions today asking the government to shelve the Lantau Tomorrow vision. I am very disappointed. We are just doing preliminary work and you already want to kill it. How about those people living in subdivided flats? Have you thought about them? So I support that the study should start. Just now, Chen Kimpo said this already. And also the Financial Secretary, Chan Mao-po, also says that we should start it right away. I don't have questions for the government. I think the government should explain more to the public. 2 weeks ago, the Harbor Works Engineering branch had a celebration, and Mr. Chang Po-hong and Dr. Ding Sun-pao were invited to speak, talking about the history of Hong Kong. Those two speeches were amazing. So I think you should spread more information to the public. Mr. Kong Chun-yu, no matter what is Chen Kim-po or Chen Mao-po, they are both talking about money. We hear that in the first or second quarter of next year, you will be submitting this to the panel. I am sure the secretary is very realistic. He will be listening to different voices. In different newspapers, I've read news about Lantau Tomorrow Vision, and a lot of them are querying the cost of the reclamation. Secretary, do you know how much do sands cost? Well, for government projects, we do not have a breakdown of all these details. We look at the whole package. Now we are doing reclamation at Tung Chung. We have an area of 137 hectares, and it's about $1,000 per square foot. That's the cost. As for Khao Yi Chau, for that 1,000 hectares, well, actually that area is a bit deeper than Tung Chung, 4 to 8 meters, not very deep, but deeper than Tung Chung. So if we use the 2018 price, the cost would be $1,300 to $1,500 per square foot. You say that no breakdown is needed, but I want to know the breakdown figures. So for Lantau Tomorrow Vision, how much sand do we have to buy, and how expensive is the sand? Can you answer my question? Well, for sand, well, we will start pouring sand in after 7 or 8 years. Well, actually, I would like to thank you for this question. For Hong Kong, our construction and demolition materials can be used for this purpose. Every year, we generate 1.5 million tons of C&D materials. Now we are transporting these materials to Taishan for their reclamation. But actually, we can use these materials at Khao Yi Chau. So this is one of the major source of filling materials. And for sea sand, I think the supply from the mainland is limited, but they have other forms of sand, and also we can get sea sand from Southeast Asia. Well, it's not practical to have a breakdown of all this. Well, Mr. Kwong, please let me finish. Secretary, I only have limited time. You still cannot answer my question. You don't know how much sand will be used, and you don't know the cost. Oriental Daily has calculated for you. It says that they would need 260 million tons. Do you think they've made a mistake? Do you think this is a wrong calculation? Well, there are a lot of assumptions. I cannot comment on the assumptions. So you think Oriental Daily is wrong? Well, you cannot say things like that. I think you are a very fair person. You won't put words in my mouth. I'm just waiting for your answer. And there are now 2 projects, quite large-scale projects. Just now I talked about Tung Chung reclamation, and for the third runway, 650 hectares. For the AA Airport Authority, they are buying sand. I think they haven't encountered any financial problems. Mr. Ma Fung Kwok. Thank you, Chairman. Well, for Lantau tomorrow reclamation, on the whole, I support it. I just want to ask, how come it's so late? After the handover, we haven't increased any land reserve. But when we look at the history of Hong Kong, reclamation has always been with us. In the early stage, Central and Wan Chai were reclaimed from the sea. And even Hong Kong, Kwun Tong, Sham Shui Po, Tsuen Wan, Tuen Mun, Cheung Kwan O, Kowloon City, Kai Tak, Tung Chung, Yau Ma Tei, Sham Shui Po, all these were reclaimed from the sea. And later, we also did reclamation in the NT. The success and prosperity of Hong Kong has been relying on reclamation. So I think your proposal comes quite late. Of course, I support it totally. And for this reclamation project, well, I think the announcement is quite sudden. There was a public consultation, but suddenly in the policy address, this project was put forward. However, I still support it. I don't think the scale is very big. It's 1,700 hectares. If you look at our history, this is really not a very large-scale reclamation. And if Hong Kong is to develop, we need to have a big land reserve. But the government has also proposed a multi-pronged approach. I also support that. This is a long-term plan, and I think it's less controversial, and the process should be smooth if we can form a consensus in society. And also, it can be used as a chip when we bargain with the property developers. Also, jobs can be created as there will be a lot of infrastructure projects. So I support the whole idea. But the government should have been better prepared before this was launched. Well, how much of the new land will be used for public housing and how much will be used for commercial purposes or cultural and sports facilities, how many hospitals and schools do we need? I think if the government can give us such concrete information, it's easier for the public to accept. Now the press and the public have a lot of queries because they do not have all the information. So I think it's necessary for the government to do a better overall planning, and consultations have to be made, and things cannot be achieved in one go. In the long run, I believe Hong Kong does have the financial capacity to build this. And by selling land, you can have revenue, so there will not be any financial problems. But there's still a lot that the government should do. No matter what, I support this reclamation proposal in principle. Thank you. For all those members who would like to speak, they have already spoken. No one else would like to speak, right? Now let's handle the motions. I've received 3 motions. One from Chan Chi-chun and Eddie Chu, one from Helena Wong, Lam Cheuk-ting and Hui Chi-fung, and the other one from Mrs. Regina Yip and Junius Ho. Let me handle the first motion. It's moved by Ray Chen and Eddie Chu. Mr. Eddie Chen, or Mr. Ray Chen. Well, a lot of people and a number of members of the task force on land supply are dissatisfied with the government's proposal. That is, without any consultation, they've launched this reclamation proposal of 1,700 hectares. I urge the government to withdraw this artificial island reclamation plan, and a public and comprehensive consultation on possible reclamation via Lantau should be conducted. And I claim a division. Let's start voting. Well, press the button showing that you are present and then press the button to vote. Who hasn't voted yet? Voting stops. 26 are present, 9 say yes, 16 say no. There is no abstention, so the motion is negative. The next motion is moved by Mr. Wan Siu-kin. Mr. Wan Siu-kin. This panel thinks that the public has not consulted the public on the Lantau Tomorrow Vision, and it deliberates, overrides the future reports of the task force on land supply, and this is against procedural justice. And also, this project is very expensive. There is not enough information. We ask the government to shelve the project immediately, and the government should focus on developing the NT, and it should use the land resumption ordinance to resume brownfield sites and idle lands in the new territories, and it should declare that in the year 2020, the Fanning golf course should be resumed. And the government should also propose to the central government that parts of the military sites should be released in order to solve Hong Kong's housing and social facility land supply problems. Now we proceed to voting. Please press the buttons. Has everybody voted? Okay, now voting stops. Result will be displayed. 25 present, 8 say yes, 16 say no, no abstention, and the motion is negative. And we have one more motion. Mrs. Regina Yip, please read out your motion. Chairman, I accept Mr. Junior Ho's suggestion. I will delete a line from my motion. Well, a lot of grassrooters are living in abject poverty, and they are living in subdivided flats, which brings shame to Hong Kong people. We urge the government to consider the land sharing pilot scheme and ask property developers to provide land mainly for building public housing so as to solve the problems for grassrooters. And now there is the American and China trade war. The property markets may go down, so the government should encourage people to buy properties at the moment.
So you want to claim a division? So, okay. We're about to vote. So please press the button to show that you're present before voting. Okay, voting begins. Who else haven't voted? Okay, voting ends. Please show the results. 23 present, yes, 9, no, 6 abstain, 7. So the motion is passed. So I think that's it for the agenda item today. Because there's still one more item on the agenda, but we've only got a few minutes left for this meeting. I don't think we have time for it. So we will defer that item to the next meeting. Any AOB? No? If not, then meeting adjourned. Thank you.